You're listening to the Alpha's love stories, romantic audiobooks that will make your heart race. Don't forget to subscribe for more enchanting love tales. Chapter 1, The Choice in the Dark. The drum beat was a pulse, a relentless, mocking heartbeat for the celebration I would never join. It thumped through the very soil of the Silverfang territory, a vibration I felt in my soul. My name is Alara, and while the rest of my pack danced, hoped, and dreamed under the full moon's glow for the mating ceremony, I was lost. Not lost in place, but in purpose. The forest swallowed me whole. Ancient pines whispered secrets above, their scent sharp and clean, a brutal contrast to the perfumed oils and hopeful sweat back in the village square. My dress, the one I'd sewn by flickering candlelight for months, was now torn and smeared with forest mud. The delicate silver thread along the hem, meant to catch the firelight, was snagged and broken, just like my chances. I pressed a trembling hand against the rough bark of an oak, steadying myself. The voices, the laughter, the music, they were ghosts on the wind. Everyone who mattered was there. Everyone with a name, a family, a future. I was 23, an age where whispers turned to pity. Alara, still unmated, such a quiet thing. A shame, really. My parents' cottage on the outskirts felt like a sentence. Their memories were my only legacy, and a heavy silence my only companion. A ragged, wet cough shattered my self-pity. It came from the black mouth of a small cave that half collapsed from the recent rains. My head snapped toward the sound. All my senses, dulled by loneliness, suddenly sharpened into razor points. That wasn't an animal. Hello, my voice was a thread swallowed by the dense woods. Is someone there? A weak, gasping moan answered. Fear, cold and immediate, shot down my spine. But beneath it, something else stirred, a compulsion. I didn't think. I moved. Pushing through the thorny underbrush, I dropped to my knees at the cave entrance. The dim light revealed a nightmare. An elderly woman, her face pale as chalk, her leg pinned under a fallen timber and a cruel slab of stone. Her eyes, clouded with pain and confusion, found mine. My granddaughter, she rasped, each word a struggle. The eastern village, I fell. Shhh, don't speak, I whispered, my own panic receding under a wave of startling calm. This was real. This was now. The ceremony, the drums, the whispers, they were a distant dream. This woman's shallow breath was the only truth. You should go, child, she choked out, a flicker of awareness in her gaze. The drums, your chance, my chance. I looked at her trapped leg, the unnatural angle. I looked at the fading light. The temperature was dropping. In the distance, the ceremonial drums reached a fever-pitch crescendo. The choosing would be happening now, pairs being formed, futures being sealed. My future was right here in the dirt, in the dark, with a stranger. A strange, solid certainty settled in my chest. It felt like the first real thing I'd chosen in years. The ceremony doesn't matter, I said, and the words once spoken became an unbreakable vow. I shrugged out of my woolen cloak, the one meant for a cool evening of celebration, and tucked it around her thin shoulders. Her skin was like ice. I'm getting you out. For the next 3 hours, I fought the earth itself. My hands, once careful with needle and thread, became tools of desperation. I clawed at mud, heaved at smaller rocks, my nails splitting, my muscles screaming. The fancy dress was ruined beyond repair, but I didn't care. Every grunt of effort, every gasping breath was a prayer. I talked to her the whole time, nonsense, stories, promises. Her name was Hilda, I learned. She'd been searching for wild medicinals for her ailing granddaughter. Finally, with a last bone-shattering heave, the main timber shifted. I pulled her free, her cry of pain echoing in the small space. She was free, but barely conscious. Shock was setting in. Her leg was badly broken. We were alone, and the night was winning. I had to get help. "I'll be back, Hilda, I swear it. Hold on." I ran. Branches lashed my face. My torn dress snagged and ripped further. I was a wild, desperate creature fleeing toward a village of light and music that no longer had a place for me. I found a young patrol guard at the border, his attention clearly on the distant festivities. "Please, you have to fetch the healers. There's a woman trapped in the woods. She's dying." He stared at me as if I were a mad forest spirit. Covered in filth, wild-eyed, babbling about a stranger when the most important night of the year was unfolding. "Are you insane? The ceremony is— Look at me." The scream tore from my throat, raw and powerful. It didn't sound like my voice. It sounded like a leader's. "A life is in the balance. Now run." Something in my expression, the absolute ferocious truth of it, broke through his disbelief. He nodded once sharply and sprinted toward the healer's lodge. I turned and plunged back into the darkness, back to Hilda. The run had taken time. Precious, stolen minutes. What if the healers were too busy? What if they didn't come? What if I had made the wrong choice after all and condemned us both? As I knelt beside Hilda again, holding her cold hand, humming a forgotten lullaby, the drums stopped. Silence. The ceremony was over. A profound, chilling quiet descended on the forest. It was done. My choice was made. And in the echoing silence, I heard the faint, ominous snap of a twig behind me, not from the direction of the village, from the deep, forbidden woods to the west. My blood turned to ice. Every hair on my arm stood up. That was not the healer. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling despite my attempt to sound strong. No answer. Only the deliberate, unsettling crunch of footsteps moving closer through the dark. Chapter 2: The Strangers in the Shadows. The footsteps were unhurried, confident, each one pressed into the soft earth with a weight that spoke of power. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of bone. I shifted, placing my own body as a fragile shield between Hilda's still form and the approaching threat. 3 figures detached themselves from the velvet blackness between the ancient pines. They were not from our pack. I knew it instantly, in the primal way a rabbit knows the wolf. They moved with a synchronized, lethal grace, their silhouettes broad and imposing against the star-specked sky. Warriors, not patrols. The one in the lead stopped several paces away, his gaze sweeping the scene, the collapsed cave, the injured elder, me, with an analytical coldness that froze the air in my lungs. He was tall, broader in the shoulders than any smith in our village, dark hair, cropped close, eyes that caught the weak moonlight and gleamed like chips of amber. His face was all sharp angles and solemn lines, with a faint, pale scar tracing his jaw. Authority radiated from him like heat from a forge. "You are on Silverfang land," I forced out, my voice tight. "The western border is behind you. You are trespassing." A low chuckle came from the wolf on his right, younger, with sun-bronzed skin and an easy posture that seemed at odds with the tension thrumming in the clearing. "Trespassing is such a harsh word. We heard a cry for help, that's all." "We don't need help," I lied, my fingers tightening around Hilda's limp hand. "Our healers are coming." The leader's eyes, those unsettling amber discs, finally settled fully on me. They didn't glance at my ruined dress or my tangled hair with pity or disdain. They assessed, calculated. "Your healers are not here, she is." He nodded toward Hilda, and her breathing grows more shallow by the minute. "Hypothermia will claim her long before your help arrives." The truth of his words was a physical blow. He was right. I could feel the terrible cold seeping from Hilda's skin into my own. The younger one spoke again, his tone losing its amusement. "No offense, but you look like you wrestled the mountain and lost. Let us assist." "Why?" The question burst from me, sharp with fear and suspicion. "Why would you care? Who are you?" The leader ignored my questions. He took a single, fluid step forward, then another, closing the distance until he stood over us. I had to crane my neck to look up at him. He didn't smell of our pack of pine and hearth smoke. He smelled of winter wind and distant, strange lands. "My name is Kale," he said, his voice a deep, steady rumble, "and I am going to examine her. You can either help me save her life, or you can continue to waste time with questions that will not change the outcome." His words were not cruel, but they were absolute. They brooked no argument. This was not a man who asked for permission. He was a man who understood necessity, and beneath that iron certainty I saw it, a flicker, a weariness in those amber depths that mirrored my own lonely nights. A recognition not of me, but of the stark, simple equation before us. A life was fading. Action was required. My defiance crumpled. I gave one sharp, desperate nod. "Her leg is broken. She hit her head. She's been in and out of consciousness." Kale crouched beside me with a predator's grace, his large hands surprisingly gentle as they probed Hilda's injuries. His touch was knowledgeable, precise. "Ethan, Lorcan, a stretcher, now." The two other wolves moved with startling efficiency, shedding their thick, travel-worn cloaks and using branches to fashion a litter. In moments, it was done. "Where is your healing lodge?" Kale asked, not looking up as he carefully stabilized Hilda's neck. "The eastern village edge, but," horror dawned anew, "you cannot go there. You are unknown wolves. The border guards will attack on sight." Kale's gaze met mine, and for the first time I saw a hint of something besides command, impatience. "Then we will take her to your border. Your people can meet us there. Decide now." There was no choice, only this terrible, fragile trust. "Yes," I whispered, "please." They lifted Hilda onto the stretcher with a seamless, practiced coordination that spoke of a lifetime of such actions. I stumbled to my feet, my legs numb, and followed as they began to move. The silent one, Lorcan, took the lead, his eyes constantly scanning the shadows. Ethan brought up the rear, his earlier levity gone, replaced by a protective vigilance. We walked in a tense silence, broken only by Hilda's ragged breaths and the crunch of our footsteps. I watched Kale's back, the unwavering strength in his posture. Who were these wolves who moved like a single entity, who carried a stranger without question? We reached the scent-marked border of Silverfang territory just as torchlight bloomed between the trees. My heart leapt, the healers, but the relief died in my throat as I saw their faces. 6 of our pack warriors, led by the grizzled Captain Ferris, his hand already on the hilt of his sword, his expression thunderous. "Halt! Identify yourselves!" Kale and his men stopped perfectly at the invisible line. They lowered the stretcher with infinite care onto our side of the border. "We are leaving," Kale stated, his voice cutting through the night. "Your elder is returned, your territory is intact." He began to turn away. "Not so fast," Ferris snarled, stepping forward. "You crossed our borders, you will explain yourselves to Alpha Thorin." Kale turned his head just slightly. The torchlight caught the scar on his jaw, made his amber eyes glow. "We crossed no borders, Captain. The injured woman was found in the neutral wilds. We carried her to her pack, that is all." He gestured to the ground. "We stand now where we stood then, on our side." My mind reeled. He was right. In my panic, I hadn't realized we had all been just outside the formal boundary when they found us. It was a technicality, but a flawless one. Ferris spluttered, enraged by the logic. His eyes shot to me, blazing with accusation. You led them here. You consorted with outsiders on the night of the ceremony. Before I could form a denial, Kale spoke again, his final words dropping into the clearing like stones into a still pond. He said, his gaze locking with mine across the divide, made a choice worth more than any ceremony. Remember that. Then he was gone. He, Ethan, and Lorcan melted into the forest shadows as if they had never been. One moment they were there, the next, only darkness. Captain Ferris rounded on me, his face livid in the torchlight. Foolish girl, do you have any idea what you have done? Who you have entangled us with? Trembling, cold to my very core, I whispered, who was he? Ferris spat on the ground, his voice a mixture of fury and dread. That was Kale of the Blackwater Pack, not just any alpha girl. He is the Shadow Wolf, the king of the mountain, and you have just drawn his eyes to our pack. The world tilted. The Shadow Wolf, a name from terrifying bedtime stories. A ruler so reclusive and powerful, other alphas spoke of him in hushed tones, and I had just ordered him about in the mud. As the healers finally rushed to Hilda, as Captain Ferris continued his furious tirade, I stood frozen at the edge of the light. I had missed the ceremony. I had saved a life, and I had, impossibly, drawn the attention of the most dangerous wolf in all the Northern Territories. What had I done? Chapter 3, The Price of a Kind Heart. The dawn brought no peace. Only a cold, hollow dread that had settled deep in my bones. I sat by my cottage window, watching the sunrise paint the sky in colors I could not feel. Hilda was alive, the healers said, stable, but her family's gratitude was a distant, muffled sound. All I could hear was Captain Ferris's voice snarling in my memory, the Shadow Wolf. My hands, scraped raw and caked with dried blood and dirt, shook as I tried to braid my hair. The simple, gray linen dress I changed into felt like a shroud. I was to report to Alpha Thorin, to explain my grave breach of protocol. The walk to the village center was a march through a gauntlet of eyes. Whispers hissed around me like serpents. There she is, the one who missed the ceremony for some crone. Heard she was with strange wolves in the woods. Probably planned it, attention-seeking, as if the Shadow Wolf would truly notice the likes of her. The words were arrows, each finding its mark. Lyra, a she-wolf who had always viewed my quiet nature as weakness, stepped directly into my path. Her smile was a razor. Ilara, what an exciting night you had. While the rest of us were forging bonds, you were digging in the dirt. How fitting. As she leaned closer, her perfume cloying. Brandon asked about you, at the start of the evening. I told him you found other interests. A fresh wound, expertly delivered. Brandon, the Gamma's son, had once shared a book with me under the old willow tree. A single, fleeting moment of kindness I'd foolishly cherished. I'm glad for him, I managed to say, the lie ash on my tongue. I pushed past her, my head held high even as my spirit crumbled. The healer's lodge offered no sanctuary. The air was thick with the scent of poultices and pain. Iris, the head healer, looked up from her herbs, her keen eyes missing nothing. She lives, thanks to you. Her voice was crisp, factual. She asked for you, the girl with moonlight hair and a warrior's heart. Her words, a tiny, fragile ember of warmth, sparked in my chest. It was smothered instantly by Iris's next words. Alpha Thorin demands your presence, immediately. She wiped her hands on her apron. It seems your forest friends have caused quite the stir." "I didn't know who they were," I whispered, the defense sounding feeble even to my own ears. "Ignorance rarely changes consequences, child." Iris's gaze softened just a fraction. "Speak the truth, it is all you have." The Alpha's residence loomed ahead, a fortress of timber and stone. The guards at the door did not look at me as I passed through. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of old smoke and older power. Alpha Thorin stood by the great stone fireplace, his back to me. He was a mountain of a man, his hair iron gray, his shoulders bearing the weight of decades of leadership. His son, Jerk, stood beside him, a younger, sharper copy, his eyes already fixed on me with icy contempt. "You sent for me, Alpha." My voice was a thread in the vast, tense room. Thorin turned. His face was not angry. It was grim, deeply, dangerously grim. "Alara, the girl who finds trouble where others find mates." He gestured to a scroll on his heavy oak desk. A message arrived at first light from Blackwater Keep, bearing the personal seal of Kale. My heart stopped dead in my chest. Jerk snatched the scroll up, his lip curled. He expresses concern for the elder's well-being, commends the compassion shown by the Silverfang female who aided her. He spat the words like poison, "An Alpha King involving himself in our domestic affairs. Because of you, I only sought to help," I began. "You crossed paths with a power we do not understand." Jerk snapped, taking a step toward me. "The Shadow Wolf does not send polite inquiries. This is a probe, a test of our borders, our strength, our weakness. And you presented him with our weakness on a platter. A pack so disordered a lone female wanders its edges, consorting with strangers. That is enough, Jerk." Thorin's voice cut through his son's tirade. He studied me, his gaze weighing my soul. "The message contains a request, or rather, a summons." The floor seemed to drop away beneath me. "A summons?" "Kale is hosting the gathering of the packs at Blackwater Keep in 3 weeks' time. Every alpha, every significant pack will be there." Thorin picked up the scroll, his brow furrowed. "He has formally requested that the Silverfang female who demonstrated remarkable courage and integrity attend." As his personal guest, the world narrowed to a single horrifying point. "No, that's impossible. He doesn't even know my name." "He knows enough," Thorin said quietly. "He knows you acted when others did not. And in the world of alphas, such an action is either a profound strength or a vulnerability to be exploited." He set the scroll down. "You will go." "Father," Jerk exploded, "you cannot be serious, sending her, a nobody, to represent us at the gathering. It's an insult. It makes us look weak, sending our weakest link." "It is not a request we can refuse," Thorin said, his voice final. "To deny the Shadow Wolf's invitation after a border incident would be seen as an act of aggression or fear." His eyes pinned me. "You will go, you will be courteous, you will be observant, and you will report everything back to me. You are a blade of grass in a storm, Alara. You must bend, not break. Do you understand?" Tears of sheer terror and frustration pricked my eyes, but I forced them back. I straightened my spine. "And if his intentions are not honorable?" A long, heavy silence filled the room. Thorin and Jerk exchanged a look that spoke volumes of ancient fears and political calculations. "Then," Thorin said, his voice barely a whisper, "you will have brought a war to our doorstep, and your kindness will have doomed us all." I was dismissed. I stumbled from the residence, the bright morning sun feeling like a cruel joke. The weight of my pack's future, a future of peace or violence, now rested on my untrained, unprepared shoulders, As I stood numb in the square, a figure approached, not Lyra with her spite, but old Iris. She pressed a small, cloth-wrapped bundle into my hands. "From Hilda," she said. Inside was a beautifully embroidered handkerchief and a note in a spidery hand, "For the girl who sees with her heart, trust its sight." Iris looked at my pale, stricken face. "The mountain is high and the shadow is deep, Alara. But remember, even a shadow cannot exist without a light to cast it. Perhaps you are the light he has not seen in a long, long time." She walked away, leaving me more confused than ever. A light. I was a spark, tiny and fragile, about to be thrown into the deepest, most dangerous darkness imaginable, and I had no choice but to burn. Chapter 4. The journey to the mountain. The next dawn arrived, cloaked in a fine, silver mist. It clung to the ground like a spectral shroud, softening the edges of the village I was leaving behind, perhaps forever. I stood at the eastern road, my single bag holding all that mattered from my old life, a pit of cold fear where my stomach should be. They came with the first true rays of sun, cutting through the fog like blades. Cale rode the same immense black stallion, an extension of his own formidable power. Ethan was on a fiery chestnut, his usual grin tempered into something more respectful. Lorcan, the silent shadow, sat astride a dappled gray, and beside them, held by a stoic stable hand, was a fourth horse. A mare. Her coat was the color of polished moonlight, her eyes deep and calm. She regarded me not with the skittishness of a new mount, but with a quiet, intelligent patience. "Her name is Selene," Cale said, his voice cutting through the morning chill. He dismounted with that effortless, predatory grace. "She will not falter with you." I approached slowly, my heart pounding for a different reason now. I held out a trembling hand. Selene nudged it gently, her breath warm against my skin, a gesture of peace, a thread of connection in the terrifying unknown. I've never ridden such a distance," I confessed, the admission leaving me feeling small. Ethan's smile returned, warm and encouraging. "Selene knows the way. She'll take care of you. Just hold on and enjoy the view. It's quite a sight when Blackwater reveals itself." "If we ever get moving," Lorcan muttered, his first words to me, his voice a low, gravelly rumble, but his dark eyes held no malice, only practical impatience. Cale simply nodded towards Selene's saddle. "We ride until midday, then rest. We will reach Blackwater by nightfall." The journey was a blur of changing landscapes and churning emotions. We left the familiar, rolling forests of Silverfang territory and climbed into rugged, granite-strewn foothills. The air grew thinner, sharper. Ethan kept up a steady stream of commentary, pointing out landmarks, sharing harmless tales, his easy chatter a lifeline against the heavy silence that radiated from Cale and Lorcan. I learned the mountain's true name was Mount Ethel, and the keep was carved into its very bones. I learned that the river that flowed from its peaks was so cold and clear it looked black, hence Blackwater. Cale rode beside me for long stretches, speaking only to give necessary directions or point out a treacherous part of the path. His presence was a constant, overwhelming force. I caught him watching me sometimes, those amber eyes unreadable. Was he assessing his pawn, regretting his request I didn't dare ask? During our noon rest by a rushing stream, as Ethan entertained us with an outrageously embellished story of a fishing mishap, Cale approached me where I sat on a sun-warmed rock. "The gathering will be unlike anything you have known," he said, his voice low. "Wolves from dozens of packs. Alliances centuries old, grudges that run deeper than this mountain. I met his gaze, trying to mask my terror. I don't know their politics, their histories. I will be a liability. You know right from wrong, he stated, as if it were that simple. You know compassion from cruelty. In that room, that is rarer than any political strategy. He paused, looking out over the vast, wild landscape. They will test you. They will try to use you to get to me, to measure my strength through my choice of companion. Then why bring me? The question burst out, raw and honest. Why not a diplomat, a warrior, someone who understands the game? He turned those piercing eyes back on me. Because I am tired of the game, Alara. I am tired of the lies, the posturing, the smiles that hide teeth. He took a step closer, and I could see the faint lines of weariness around his eyes, the true weight of the crown he wore. For one gathering, I want truth beside me. Even if it is unpracticed. His confession stunned me, the mighty shadow wolf, weary of his own power. It made him seem suddenly, profoundly real, not a legend but a man, a lonely one. I will try, I whispered, a promise to him and to myself. He gave a single, solemn nod. That is all I ask. The final leg of the journey was made in a deepening twilight. We ascended a winding path that seemed to claw at the very sky. The trees thinned, replaced by jagged cliffs and the constant, roaring whisper of the Black River far below. And then we rounded a final bend. Blackwater Keep. It wasn't built, it was revealed. The mountain itself had been sculpted, carved, and fortified into a fortress of terrifying beauty. Towers of dark gray stone pierced the violet evening sky. Windows glowed with warm firelight like a constellation caught in the rock face. A massive gate, wrought of black iron, stood open like a maw, leading to a courtyard bustling with activity. It was awe-inspiring. It was utterly intimidating. As we rode through the gate, 100 eyes turned our way. Warriors on the battlefields, servants in the yard, elegantly dressed wolves on the balconies, all watched the return of their king. And their gazes, sharp and curious, settled on the strange, plainly dressed girl on the moon-white mare. The whispers began here too, but these were different, not petty malice but calculated interest. I was a new variable in their ancient equation. In the center of the courtyard, a woman waited. She was older, her hair a stunning cascade of silver, but her posture was regal, her gaze as sharp as a hawk's. This, I knew without being told, was Kale's mother. We dismounted. Kale went to her, clasping her hands. "Mother." Her eyes moved past him, landing on me. She looked me up and down, not with disdain, but with the intense scrutiny of a master jeweler assessing a rough stone. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. Then she smiled. It transformed her stern face into one of warmth and startling beauty. "So," she said, her voice rich and clear, "you are the one who looked at a night of empty ritual and chose a single, meaningful act instead." She stepped forward and took my cold hands in her warm, strong ones. "Welcome to Blackwater, Alara. I am Saridwin. And we have much to discuss before the wolves descend upon us." Her welcome was genuine. It was also a declaration. The testing had already begun, but I had, it seemed, passed the first and most important exam, hers. As a kindly maid led me away to the chambers that would be my home, I looked back over my shoulder. Kale stood with his mother, watching me go. In the torchlight of his formidable keep, his expression was once again unreadable. I had arrived at the mountain. Now I had to learn how to survive it. Chapter 5. A web of eyes and whispers. My chambers were not a room, they were a sanctuary carved from moonlight and shadow. The walls were smooth, pale stone, the furnishings elegant but simple. a large bed with silver-gray linens, a writing desk by a window that looked out over the dizzying drop to the Blackwater River far below, a fireplace that crackled with welcoming warmth. It was more space than my entire cottage. A young maid with fiery red hair and a shy smile introduced herself as Briar. "Lady Ceridwen thought you might need a friendly face," she said, bustling about, laying out a soft nightdress. "I'm to be your attendant while you're here, whatever you need." The kindness was disarming. I had expected coldness, suspicion, not this, but the peace was short-lived. Ceridwen joined me for a private dinner in a small, sunlit alcove off the main hall. Over a meal of roasted fowl and honeyed roots, she began my education. "The gathering is not a celebration, Alara," she said, her silverware moving with precise grace. "It is a battlefield where the weapons are words and the casualties are alliances. The first packs arrive tomorrow." She listed names that meant nothing to me, but she imbued them with meaning. "The Frostfang pack from the north, proud, traditional, quick to take offense. Their Alpha Boreas will test your resilience. The Sunstone pack from the southern deserts, all charm and sly deals. Their Alpha Cyrus will try to flatter secrets from you. The Ravenwing pack," she paused, her eyes darkening. "Be most careful of Ravenwing, their Alpha Mordred. He is ambitious. He sees Kale's power not as a fact of nature, but as a challenge." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, pushing food around my plate, my appetite gone. "Because Kale will not," she said softly. "He believes in showing rather than telling. He wants your reactions to be pure, untainted by his prejudice. It is a noble and incredibly dangerous idea." She reached across the table, her hand covering mine. "I am telling you because someone must. You are a good heart in a den of predators. I would see that heart protected." Her words were a shield and a warning all at once. The next day, the avalanche of arrivals began. The courtyard became a roaring, chaotic spectacle of snorting horses, shouted greetings, and the colorful banners of a dozen packs. From my window, I watched them, alphas with entourages of warriors and mates, all clad in finery meant to proclaim their status. I was to meet no one today, Ceridwen had decreed. "Let them wonder, let them whisper. Mystery is a form of power when you have no other." So I watched. I saw Boreas of Frostfang, a giant of a man with a beard like ice, his laughter booming but his eyes missing nothing. I saw Cyrus of Sunstone, slender and smiling, gliding through the crowd, touching arms, sharing laughs, his gaze as calculating as a fox in a henhouse. And I saw Mordred of Ravenwing. He arrived last, his party small but potent. He was not as physically imposing as Boreas, nor as charming as Cyrus. He was lean, with hair the color of a raven's wing and eyes so dark they seemed to absorb the light. He moved with a silent, coiled intensity. When Kale came out to greet him, the air in the courtyard changed. The easy chatter died. The two alphas clasped forearms, their exchange polite, but the space between them crackled with a tension so potent I could feel it from 3 stories up. Mordred's eyes lifted, as if drawn by my stare. They found my window, found me. A slow, thin smile touched his lips. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a hunter who has just identified the weakest member of the herd. I jerked back from the window, my heart hammering. That evening, a formal welcome feast was held in the great hall, a cavernous space lit by 100 torches with a ceiling lost in shadows. Ceridwen had a gown brought to my room, a simple but stunning dress of deep twilight blue, the color of the sky just before true night. It fit perfectly, a gift, Briar said, her eyes wide. From the king's own mother. Dressed in a stranger's finery, I felt like an imposter. But when I looked in the polished bronze mirror, I didn't see the invisible girl from Silverfang. I saw someone else. Someone with purpose in her eyes, even if it was just fear. Saradwin escorted me down. "Remember," she whispered as we paused at the top of a grand staircase that swept down into the hall. "You are here because Kale values what you represent. Hold your head high. You have earned this place." The moment we appeared on the staircase, a hush began to spread. Conversations faltered. Heads turned. I felt the weight of 100 gazes, curious, hostile, intrigued, dismissive. I focused on putting one foot in front of the other, on not tripping on the hem of my beautiful alien gown. Kale stood at the base of the stairs. He was dressed in formal black and silver, a circlet of dark iron on his brow. He looked every inch the shadow wolf, remote and powerful. But as I descended, his eyes locked on mine, and in their amber depths I saw not the king but the man from the forest, the one who had knelt in the dirt. He gave me the faintest, almost imperceptible nod. It was enough. He did not offer his arm, did not make a show of it. But when I reached him, he turned smoothly and we walked together toward the high table. Our progression through the hall was a silent proclamation. We took our seats. The feast began. Music swelled, servants flowed with food and wine, and the roar of conversation resumed, now tinged with a new, speculative energy. The first test came almost immediately. Alpha Boreas lumbered over, a massive goblet in his hand. "Kale. Good to see the mountain hasn't swallowed you yet." His voice was a friendly bellow, but his pale blue eyes were on me. "And who is this delicate flower you found clinging to the rocks? Not from around here, are you, girl?" "This is Alara of the Silverfang pack," Kale said, his tone neutral. "A guest of Blackwater." "Silverfang," Boreas chuckled, a sound like grinding stones. "Thorin's lot, he sent you a diplomat?" The implication was clear. I was no diplomat. Before I could shrink, before the old, familiar shame could rise, I heard my own voice, clear and steady. "Alpha Thorin sent me to extend Silverfang's respect to the gathering, Alpha Boreas, and to learn from the wisdom gathered here." Boreas blinked, surprised by the direct, courteous response. He'd expected a flinch, a stammer. He grunted, appraising me anew. "Respect. Good. Wisdom, well, that remains to be seen." He raised his goblet to me in a semi-mocking toast and moved on. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Kale, beside me, did not look over, but I saw the slightest tension ease from his shoulders. The second test was more insidious. Cyrus of Sunstone glided up not long after, his smile a brilliant, practiced thing. "My dear," he purred, taking my hand before I could offer it. "What a breath of fresh mountain air you are. So far from the tedious politics, I imagine. Tell me, does the simplicity of Silverfang life agree with you? It must be a relief to be away from all those rustic concerns." His words were coated in honey, but their purpose was to belittle, to frame me as a simpleton from a backwater pack. He was digging, gently, for any crack of insecurity. I extracted my hand gently but firmly. "Every pack has its strengths, Alpha Cyrus. Silverfang's strength lies in its loyalty and its heart. I find those are never rustic concerns, but the foundation of any lasting power." Cyrus's smile didn't falter, but it tightened at the edges. His eyes flickered to Kale, then back to me. "Indeed, how quaintly profound." He inclined his head and slithered away to work his charms elsewhere. I met Kale's gaze briefly. He gave another small, almost invisible nod. Approval, but the true challenge was still to come. As the feast wore on, I felt a cold prickling on the back of my neck. I turned. Across the crowded, noisy hall, standing apart in a pool of shadow, was Mordred. He was not eating, not drinking, not speaking. He was simply watching Kale, watching me. His dark eyes held a chilling, intellectual curiosity, as if we were pieces on a game board he was calculating how to capture. When our eyes met, he didn't look away. He raised his own goblet in a slow, deliberate salute, not to Kale, to me. Then he turned and disappeared into the crowd, leaving a trail of icy dread in my veins. The feast ended. The alliances had been signaled, the first moves made. I had survived the opening volley. But as I retired to my chambers, the echo of Mordred's silent salute haunting me, I knew with terrifying certainty. The game was just beginning, and I was no longer just a guest. I was a player. Chapter 6: The First Council and a Whispered Warning. The morning after the feast dawned clear and bitterly cold. The real work of the gathering began, the council sessions. These were closed meetings, held in a circular stone chamber deep within the heart of the keep. Only alphas, their designated heirs, and a single advisor were permitted. I was none of those things, so I waited, a restless ghost in the sunlit gardens that clung to the mountainside, trying to find solace in the hardy, frost-tipped blooms. Briar had brought me a heavy wool cloak, but the chill seeped in from the inside. What were they saying in there? Were they already arguing? Was Kale facing their scrutiny because of me? My thoughts were a frantic swarm. I was so preoccupied I didn't hear the soft footsteps on the gravel path until they were nearly upon me. The mountain air is too sharp for Silverfang blood, I hear. I spun around. Mordred stood there, having appeared as silently as a shadow lengthening. He wore no cloak, seemingly impervious to the cold. His dark eyes swept over me, not with the leering interest of some, but with a detached, analytical focus that was somehow worse. "My blood is just fine, Alpha Mordred," I said, forcing my voice to steadiness. "I find the air here clarifying." A faint, humorless smile touched his lips. "Clarifying, yes, it strips away pretense, doesn't it? Reveals the true shape of things." He took a step closer. I held my ground. "You made an interesting impression last night. Boreas thinks you're a pretty pawn. Cyrus thinks you're a simpleton playing above your station." He tilted his head. "I am not sure what I think." "You owe me no opinion," I replied, my heart thudding against my ribs. "Don't I?" He moved again, a slow circle around me like a shark. "Kale is a fortress, impenetrable. For years he has presented no weakness, no opening, no personal interest. Then from nowhere he arrives at the gathering with a she-wolf from a middling pack who has no political value, no family connections, no apparent strength." He stopped in front of me. "That is not a trivial act, it is a message or a mistake. I am trying to decide which." His words were like ice water. He saw me not as a person, but as a variable in Kale's defense, a potential crack. "Perhaps it is neither," I said, meeting his unnerving gaze. "Perhaps it is just a choice." "Kale does not make just choices," Mordred stated flatly. "Every breath he takes is calculated. So what does your presence calculate, Alara of Silverfang? What does he see in you that we do not?" His voice dropped to a whisper, cold and intimate. "Or what weakness does he hide behind you?" The accusation hung in the frosty air. Before I could form a retort, a new voice cut through the garden. "Mordred, the council is waiting for you. Bothering my guests is poor form." Kale stood at the garden entrance, Lorcan a silent statue behind him. His expression was calm, but his eyes were like banked fires. The authority in his voice was absolute, a physical pressure in the space between us. Mordred didn't startle. He simply turned that chilling smile on Kale. Merely exchanging pleasantries, Kale. Your guest is refreshingly direct. He gave a slight, mocking bow to me. Until next time, Alara. The mystery deepens. He walked past Kale without another word, disappearing into the keep. The oppressive weight of his presence lifted, leaving me trembling. Kale approached me. What did he say to you? I wrapped my arms around myself. He thinks I'm a shield. Or a weakness you're hiding. He's trying to solve the puzzle of why I'm here. Kale was silent for a long moment, looking toward where Mordred had gone. He is the most dangerous wolf in that chamber, he said quietly, more to himself than to me. Not because he is the strongest, but because he is the cleverest. He fights not with strength, but with the truths people wish to hide. He turned his gaze back to me. The morning light caught the amber in his eyes. You are neither a shield nor a weakness, Alara. You are a reminder I sorely needed. He seemed to want to say more, but stopped himself. The council recesses for the midday meal. Will you join me? It wasn't a command, it was a request. An offer of shelter, I nodded, unable to speak. The midday meal in the great hall was a tense, buzzing affair. The alphas and their parties were now divided into clear clusters, Frostfang allies here, Sunstone connections there. Mordred sat alone, watching everything. I sat beside Kale at the high table. The questions came again, less blunt but more probing. How does Alpha Thorin view the eastern trade routes? An older alpha from a timber pack asked me, his eyes sharp. I am not privy to my alpha's trade strategies, I answered honestly. But I know Silverfang values fair exchange and lasting partnership. A pretty sentiment, the alpha grunted, but he looked thoughtful. A she-wolf from a coastal pack, Mordred's ally, leaned forward. And what of your own prospects, dear? Surely your alpha hopes this visit might lead to a favorable match for Silverfang. The implication was crude and obvious. Heat rushed to my cheeks. Before I could answer, Kale's voice, low and final, cut in. Alara is a guest of Blackwater. Her prospects are her own concern. Not a subject for barter at this table. The she-wolf recoiled slightly at the frost in his tone. The table fell silent. In the silence, a messenger, breathless and dust-streaked, hurried into the hall. He went not to the herald, but directly to the Frostfang table, kneeling to whisper urgently into Alpha Boreas's ear. Boreas's face, already ruddy, darkened to a thunderous purple. He slammed a massive fist on the table, making the plates jump. What? All conversation ceased. Every eye turned to him. Boreas rose, shaking with rage. He pointed a thick finger directly across the hall at the Ravenwing contingent. Mordred, you viper, my scouts have just dragged themselves back, ambushed at the Whisper Pass, in neutral territory, 2 dead. They wore no colors but the arrowheads, black iron fletched with raven feathers. A gasping murmur swept the room. Neutral territory attacks were a grave breach of the gathering's peace. Mordred set down his goblet with deliberate calm. He looked bored. A tragedy, Boreas. Bandits are a scourge. They often steal arrows from the dead. It proves nothing. Liar, Boreas roared, starting around the table. His warriors rose with him, hands on weapons. In an instant, Ravenwing warriors were on their feet. The hall erupted into shouting, chairs scraping, the tension of days exploding into sudden, violent potential. Kale was moving before I even processed it. He didn't shout. He simply stood, and his presence seemed to suck the sound from the room. Enough. The word was quiet, but it carried the weight of the mountain. Everyone froze. "We are here under a covenant of peace," Kale said, his voice like grinding stone. "An accusation has been made. It will be investigated. By me, by my men." His gaze swept the room, landing on Boreas, then on Mordred. "There will be no bloodshed in Blackwater, not over whispers and feathers. Is that understood?" Boreas seethed, but he gave a curt, furious nod. Mordred merely inclined his head, a picture of cool innocence. But as the chaos subsided into a sullen, buzzing quiet, Mordred's eyes found mine again. And this time his message was clear. "See, this is the game, and now the first piece has fallen. The fragile piece of the gathering had shattered. An attack, deaths." And the shadow of blame pointed directly at the most dangerous wolf in the room. Kale had stopped a war in his hall. But as I looked at the faces filled with fresh suspicion and old hatred, I knew the real battle had just begun. And the mystery of the attack in the Whisper Pass now hung over us all, a dark cloud threatening to bury everything, including the fragile understanding growing between a king and the girl from the woods. Chapter 7: The Investigation and a Fractured Trust. The keep descended into a state of simmering, silent war. The easy camaraderie of the feast was a distant memory. Now packs kept to their own wings, their own tables, their own circles of trust. The great hall during meals was a landscape of icy stares and terse, formal conversations. Kale was gone. He had left at first light with Lorcan and a contingent of his most trusted Blackwater guards to investigate the site of the ambush at Whisper Pass. Ethan had stayed behind, his usual grin replaced by a watchful sternness. "His orders," he told me when I asked, his voice uncharacteristically grave, "to keep the peace here and to watch over you." "Watch over me?" I asked, a new thread of fear weaving into the tapestry of my anxiety. Ethan's gaze was sober. The attack was a provocation. "Someone wants to shatter this gathering. You are a symbol of Kale's new direction. That makes you a target for those who fear change." I was under a form of beautiful, gilded house arrest. Saradwin was a constant, steadying presence, continuing my lessons in protocol and history with renewed intensity. But even her composed mask slipped at times, revealing worry for her son in the dangerous, disputed pass. 3 days crawled by. The tension was a living thing, thickening the air. Whispers swirled like poisoned mist. Some said Frostfang had staged the attack to frame Ravenwing and gain sympathy. Others whispered that Mordred was clearing a path for a power grab, testing boundaries. I spent hours in the library, a vast, echoing chamber of scrolls and maps, trying to understand the ancient grudges that fueled these suspicions. I found maps of Whisper Pass, a narrow, treacherous defile that was indeed neutral ground, a vital shortcut between the northern and western territories. On the afternoon of the third day, as I traced the inked lines of the pass on a brittle parchment, a shadow fell over the table. Seeking tactical knowledge or just a quiet place to hide, Mordred. He stood beside the high library window, backlit, his face in shadow. Every muscle in my body tightened. The library is open to all gathering guests, is it not? I kept my eyes on the map. He moved closer, his footsteps silent on the thick rug. He leaned over the table, his finger long, pale, and elegant, coming down not on the pass, but on a point just east of it. Silverfang territory. "Your home is not so far from here, is it? A few days' hard ride." His voice was conversational, such a vulnerable border. So many lonely forest paths. The threat was veiled but crystal clear. My blood ran cold. Are you threatening my pack, Alpha Mordred? Threaten? No, he straightened, his dark eyes gleaming. I am merely observing geography. And wondering if an attack can happen in neutral Whisper Pass, where else might violence bloom, perhaps closer to home for certain interested parties. He was implying Silverfang could be next, or that we could be blamed. My mind raced. Was this why Kale had brought me? Was my presence somehow supposed to shield my pack from being dragged into this? You speak in circles, I said, my voice trembling with suppressed fury. If you have an accusation, make it plainly. He smiled then, a thin, cold curve of his lips. I accuse no one yet. I am merely connecting dots, a mysterious attack, a mysterious guest, a king who breaks tradition. The picture is not yet complete, Alara, but I am an excellent painter. He turned to leave, then paused. Tell me, when Kale returns, what will he find? Will he find the truth of the attack, or will he find that the seeds of discord have already sprouted here in his very keep, watered by unfamiliar loyalties? He left me then, his insinuations hanging in the dusty library air like a toxic fog. He wasn't just threatening Silverfang, he was subtly, poisonously suggesting that I could be part of the plot, that my presence was the first move in a game against Kale. The fear turned to a cold, hard knot in my stomach. I was not just a target. I was being fashioned into a weapon to be used against the one who had brought me here. Kale returned at dusk on the fourth day. The entire keep felt him return, a shift in the energy, a sharpening of attention. He went directly to the council chamber. The alphas were summoned. I waited in my chambers, pacing. Briar brought me dinner, but it sat untouched. The moon was high when a knock came at my door, not Briar's soft tap. This was firm, solid. I opened it. Kale stood there. He still wore his travel clothes, dust from the road clinging to his boots, his face etched with deep lines of fatigue and something darker, a grim fury held in check by sheer will. Come with me, he said, his voice hoarse. He didn't lead me to the gardens or a quiet alcove. He led me to a small, secure chamber near the barracks, a room of stone and hard wood with a single map unrolled on a table. Lorcan stood guard outside. Kale went straight to the map, jabbing a finger at Whisper Pass. The attack was real. 2 Frostfang scouts dead, ambush from the high rocks, professional, brutally efficient. My heart ached for the lost lives. Did you find proof? The arrows, Ravenwing arrows, without a doubt. He sighed, the sound heavy with frustration. Too perfect, left in the bodies as if waiting to be found. You think it's a frame? The words rushed out. He looked at me, his amber eyes burning with intensity. Mordred is many things. A fool is not one of them. Leaving his signature on a crime in neutral ground would be an act of sheer stupidity. This was meant to be found. This was meant to inflame. Then who? Someone who wants a war between Frostfang and Ravenwing. Someone who would benefit from the chaos. He ran a hand over his face. Boreas is too proud, too hot-headed to see it. He is ready to march on Ravenwing lands tonight. I have barely restrained him. The situation was even more perilous than I'd imagined. What can you do? My word as host and arbiter is all that holds the peace, but my word is now under strain. He paused, his gaze searching my face. Mordred came to see you in the library. It wasn't a question, of course he knew. I felt a strange pang. Had he been having me watched, or was Lorcan's network simply that thorough? Yes, I admitted. He threatened my pack, and he implied that my being here was part of some scheme, that I might have conflicting loyalties. Kale went very still. The air in the small room grew frigid. And do you? The question was a knife so unexpected it stole my breath. How can you ask me that? I whispered, hurt lancing through me. After everything? Because Mordred's poison is designed to seep into every crack, Alara, he said, his voice low and strained. He doesn't need proof, he just needs doubt, and right now doubt is a luxury I cannot afford. I must trust my own judgment, absolutely. He was not accusing me. He was showing me the battlefield. My loyalty wasn't just a feeling, it was a strategic asset he needed to be able to count on. The weight of it was crushing. I have no loyalty to anyone here but you, I said, the truth raw and plain. You saw me in the forest, you know my heart. If that is not enough, then send me away. Tonight, for a long, agonizing moment, he said nothing. He just looked at me and I saw the war in his own eyes, the king who could trust no one and the man who had brought a stranger to his mountain because he saw something true. Finally, he let out a long, weary breath. The tension in his shoulders eased just a fraction. It is enough. He said it quietly as if accepting a lifeline. Your heart is the one thing in this entire mess that is not a weapon or a lie. Forgive me for questioning it. The relief was so profound it made my knees weak. But, he continued, his expression turning grave again, Mordred has fired the first shot in a different war, a war of perception. He is painting you as a conspirator or a weakness. We must be prepared. The next council session is tomorrow. He will make a move. What kind of move? Kale's jaw tightened. He will demand something, a concession, proof of my impartiality, or he will challenge my right to host, to arbitrate, and he will use you to do it. The fear returned, colder and sharper. What do I do? He stepped closer until only the map lay between us. You do what you did in the forest and in the feast hall. You stand your ground, you speak your truth. No matter what he says, no matter what he implies. His eyes held mine, a fierce, protective light in their amber depths. I will be beside you, but this battle, Alara, this one you must fight with your own voice. Can you do that? I thought of Hilda's cold hand, of the drum beats fading into the forest night, of the choice that had led me here to this moment, to this man who carried a mountain on his shoulders. I straightened my spine. The girl from the margins was gone. In her place stood someone who had saved a life, who had faced down alphas, who had earned a place at a king's side. Yes, I said, and my voice did not shake. I can. He nodded, a look of fierce pride flashing across his weary face. Then get some rest. Tomorrow we face the wolf in his own den. As I left the chamber, the weight of the coming confrontation settled on me, but it was a different weight now. Not just fear, not just duty, it was purpose. Mordred thought I was a pawn. Tomorrow I would show him I was a queen in the making. Chapter 8. The council's gauntlet. The council chamber felt different. The air was no longer thick with debate. It was charged with the brittle, crackling tension of a lightning strike about to fall. The circular stone room seemed smaller, the faces of the alphas sharper, their eyes like chips of flint. Kale sat at the head of the stone table, his posture rigid, his face an impassive mask. I sat in a chair placed just behind and to his right, a position of visibility without official voice. Saradwin had insisted, "You must be seen, you cannot hide." Boreas of Frostfang looked ready to ignite. His massive fists were clenched on the table, his face a thundercloud. Across from him, Mordred of Ravenwing was a study in calm contrast, examining his own fingernails with detached interest. Cyrus of Sunstone watched everyone, a faint, calculating smile on his lips, enjoying the spectacle. Kale began without preamble. The investigation into the Whisper Pass ambush is concluded. The attackers left no trail beyond the evidence planted. It was an act designed to provoke war, not to claim territory. Boreas slammed his fist down. Planted, you would dismiss the murder of my men as some trickery. Their arrows were in their backs. I dismiss nothing, Kale said, his voice dangerously quiet. I state a fact. The act serves Ravenwing no strategic purpose at this time. It serves only chaos. Or it serves to make Ravenwing appear framed, Cyrus piped up smoothly, stirring the pot. A clever double bluff, perhaps. Mordred finally looked up. He didn't address Boreas or Cyrus. His dark eyes went directly to Kale, and then slowly they shifted to me. A cold smile touched his lips. Chaos indeed. It is fascinating what a single, unexpected element can introduce into a stable system. A spark in dry tinder. Every eye in the room followed his gaze to me. I felt the heat of their collective stare, a physical pressure. Leave her out of this, Mordred, Kale growled, a low warning rumble. But why? Mordred asked, all false innocence. She is here, is she not? A part of this gathering, a part of your council. He leaned forward. Tell me, Kale, when you ride to investigate an act of war against an ally, who do you leave in charge of your keep, your beta, your captain? He paused, letting the silence stretch. Or do you leave it under the watchful eye of a wolf from a pack with unclear allegiances in this matter? The accusation was now explicit. The room erupted. By the ancestors, Mordred, you go too far. A grizzled alpha from a western pack barked. Does he? Boreas roared, turning his fury on me. Silverfang sits on the border of the pass. Their loyalty has always been flexible. My heart hammered so violently I thought it would break my ribs. My palms were slick with sweat. I could feel Kale's fury radiating beside me, a contained inferno. Mordred pressed on, his voice a silken poison. I merely ask questions that hang in the air. An attack happens. The only wolf who benefits from Frostfang and Ravenwing conflict is one who wishes to see both weakened. Who stands to gain from that, and who arrives at this gathering with a mysterious, unvetted companion from a pack that could easily move scouts through that territory unnoticed. He was constructing a cage of suspicion around me with words, and I was trapped inside it. I saw it in the faces around the table, doubt, shifting allegiances, the easy scapegoat presented to them. Kale stood. The movement was fluid, but it held the promise of violence. You are accusing my guest of treason and of murder on no evidence but your own ambition. I accuse no one, Mordred said, spreading his hands. I only observe that your faith in this stranger blinds you to the obvious, that your judgment in this matter is compromised. It was the challenge Kale had predicted, not to his strength but to his wisdom, to his right to rule this gathering. By attacking me, Mordred was attacking the very foundation of Kale's authority. I could see it crumbling. The united front Kale needed to keep the peace was fracturing before my eyes, and I was the crack. A cold clarity washed over me. The fear didn't vanish, but it solidified into something else, a sharp, focused certainty. Mordred wanted me silent, wanted me to shrink. That was the role he had written for me. I would not play it. Before Kale could deliver what looked like a lethal retort, I stood. The scrape of my chair on stone was deafening in the sudden silence. Every face, stunned, turned to me. A female, a guest, rising to speak in the Alpha's council. It was unprecedented. An outrage. Kale's hand shot out, a subtle gesture to stop me, his eyes wide with warning. I ignored it. I looked not at Mordred, but at Boreas, whose rage was now mixed with confusion. Alpha Boreas, I said, my voice clear, ringing in the stone chamber. It did not shake. You mourn two brave scouts. Their lives were worth more than arrows and feathers. Do you truly believe their deaths were purchased so cheaply? By a plot so thin a child could see through it? Boreas blinked, taken aback by the direct address. What are you saying, girl? I am saying that to blame Ravenwing based on this pantomime of evidence, dishonors your men's sacrifice. It makes them pawns in a game they did not choose to play. I turned my gaze to the rest of the table. And all of you, you smell a trap, yet you are all scrambling to be the first to spring it. Can you not see that is the true goal, to make you enemies of each other? I finally looked at Mordred. His expression of cool amusement had frozen. His eyes were dark pits fixed on me. You speak boldly for one with so much to hide. I have nothing to hide but the truth that seems to offend you so deeply, I fired back. That a person can act without political motive, that an alpha can value something other than power. I took a step forward, placing myself level with Kale at the table's head. You ask who benefits from chaos? Look to the one who controls the narrative. Look to the one who sows doubt with a whisper, who points fingers while his own hands remain clean. The poison is not in the arrows, Alpha Mordred. It is in the words spoken after. A stunned silence followed. I had not just defended myself. I had turned his own weapon against him, painting him as the architect of the discord. Cyrus let out a low whistle. The lamb has teeth. Mordred's calm shattered. A flicker of pure, unadulterated rage flashed in his eyes. He stood, his chair screeching back. You dare? Enough. Kale's voice was not loud, it was final. It was the sound of a door slamming shut on all further debate. He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw no anger, no disapproval. I saw a blazing, fierce pride that stole my breath. He addressed the council, his authority now absolute, reforged in the fire of the confrontation. The attack in Whisper Pass will be treated as the work of a third party, unknown. Blackwater will lead a joint patrol of all packs to secure the pass. Any further accusations without concrete proof will be considered an act of aggression against this council and against me. He stared down Mordred, whose face was now a pale, taut mask of fury. Is that understood? One by one the alphas nodded, even Boreas, though he grumbled. The momentum for war had been broken, not by Kale's command alone, but because nobody from Silverfang had stood up and called their bluff. Mordred was the last. He gave the faintest, coldest nod, his eyes promising retribution. But the battle was lost, for now. As the council broke up in a murmur of shaken voices, Kale waited until only we remained. He turned to me. He didn't speak. He simply looked at me as if seeing me for the very first time. Then he did something that shocked me more than any accusation. He reached out and took my hand. His grip was strong, warm, anchoring. "Thank you," he said, the words thick with emotion. You didn't just speak for yourself, you spoke for the peace I am trying to build, a peace I was beginning to doubt was possible. He held my hand for a moment longer, a silent communion in the empty chamber before releasing it. But you have made a powerful enemy today. Mordred will not forget this. I know, I whispered, the adrenaline fading, leaving me trembling. Good, he said, a grim smile touching his lips, because neither will I, and now neither will they. He gestured to the door where the other alphas had departed. You are no longer just my guest, Alara. After today, you are a power in your own right. He led me from the chamber. As we walked the torchlit corridors, I felt the weight of gazes from servants and guards alike, but they were different now. Not curiosity, but respect. Awe even. I had walked into the wolf's den and emerged not as prey, but as a hunter. The invisible girl was gone forever. In her place was a woman who had faced down the council and won. But as the echo of Mordred's furious gaze haunted me, I knew the cost. The shadow had deepened, and the next move in this deadly game would be his. Chapter 9, A Night of Secrets and Smoke. A fragile, exhausted peace settled over Blackwater Keep. The joint patrols, a mix of Frostfang, Ravenwing, Blackwater, and smaller pack warriors, were dispatched to Whisper Pass, a tense, symbolic show of unity that felt as stable as ice in spring. The Alphas retreated to their corners to lick wounds and plot anew. For me, the victory in the council chamber was a hollow tremor. The looks of respect were a mask I wore, but underneath Mordred's final, venomous glare was a splinter in my soul. He had been publicly humiliated. A creature like him would not let that stand. Kale was different. The grim weight on his shoulders seemed lighter. He sought me out more often, not for strategy, but for conversation. We walked the high battlements as the sun set, painting the snow-capped peaks in bloody orange and purple. We discussed everything and nothing: the migratory patterns of eagles, the legends of the mountain, the stubborn wildflowers that grew in the cruelest cracks. He was allowing me to see the man behind the crown. The one who loved his home, who worried for his people, who found solace in the relentless, honest wind. And I, in turn, felt the walls around my own heart, built from years of loneliness, begin to soften, to crumble. It was a dangerous, beautiful feeling. 3 nights after the council, a feast was held again, this time to celebrate the departure of the joint patrols and the renewed spirit of cooperation. The air was less hostile, but a new, watchful tension had replaced the open aggression. Everyone was waiting. The feast was lavish. Music played, a softer, more melodic strain than before. I wore another gown from Ceridwen, this one the deep green of pine forests, and I felt less like an imposter. I sat beside Kale, participating in the polite, surface-level conversations, feeling his quiet, steady presence like a shield. It was during a lull, as a troupe of acrobats from a southern pack performed with ribbons of fire, that I noticed him. Mordred was not at his table. My eyes scanned the shadowy edges of the hall, and I found him. He was in deep, intense conversation with a man I didn't recognize, a wolf from one of the smaller, neutral packs who had kept mostly silent during the council. The man's face was pale, his gestures nervous. Mordred leaned in, speaking rapidly, his expression not angry but compelling. He pressed a small, heavy-looking pouch into the man's hand. The man glanced around furtively, then nodded once sharply and pocketed the pouch before melting back into the crowd. A cold trickle of dread dripped down my spine. A bribe, an instruction. I instinctively turned to whisper to Kale, but he was momentarily engaged, listening to Alpha Boreas recount a likely exaggerated hunting tale. When I looked back, Mordred was gone from the spot. My appetite vanished. The laughter and music became a grating noise. I excused myself, pleading a slight headache, and slipped from the high table. I needed air. I needed to think. I moved through the crowded hall toward a side archway that led to a quieter terrace. As I passed a pillar, a hand shot out from the shadows and clamped around my wrist. I stifled a scream. It was Mordred. He pulled me into the deep shadow of the pillar, his grip like iron. "An impressive performance the other day," he hissed, his face inches from mine. His breath smelled of spiced wine and malice. "You have a talent for drama, but the play is not over." "Let me go," I demanded, trying to wrench my arm free. You have positioned yourself as Kale's conscience, his moral compass. His voice was a venomous whisper. Tell me, does his compass point north when he learns his trusted guest has been keeping secrets? I have no secrets from him, I spat, my fear giving way to fury. No. His dark eyes gleamed. What about your little midnight errand on the second night of the gathering, when you left your chambers and wandered the lower corridors, near the servants' quarters, the guard posts? Ice flooded my veins. I had done that. Restless, overwhelmed, I had gone for a walk to clear my head. It had been innocent. But how did he know? Everyone saw you, he smirked, reading my horror. A restless spirit, perhaps, or someone establishing patterns, learning routes. For what purpose, I wonder? He was constructing another narrative. Painting my innocent anxiety as reconnaissance. It was nothing, I whispered, the fight draining from me. To you, perhaps, to a king already under scrutiny for his judgment, with an attack hanging over his keep, it could look like something else entirely. Especially if, say, an item of value were to go missing from those very quarters tomorrow. A piece of Frostfang jewelry, perhaps, a token of good faith from Boreas. He leaned closer, found maybe in a certain guest's chambers. The threat was horrifyingly clear. He would frame me for theft, not just theft, stealing from an alpha under the king's protection. It would destroy Kale's credibility completely and turn Boreas's rage directly onto me, and by extension onto Kale for harboring a criminal. You wouldn't dare, I breathed, wouldn't I? He released my wrist as if disgusted by the touch. You took something from me in that chamber, my standing, my momentum. I will have it back, and I will take everything from you in return, your reputation, his trust, your safety. He smoothed his tunic. Consider this a courtesy, a glimpse of the checkmate to come. There is no move you can make, little pawn. He stepped back into the flickering light of the hall, gave me a mockingly courteous bow, and disappeared into the revelry. I stood trembling in the shadows, the cold stone of the pillar at my back. My mind raced, a terrified animal in a trap. I had to tell Kale. Immediately. But as I pushed away from the pillar, a new, more terrifying thought occurred to me. What if Kale already doubted me? Mordred's poison was subtle. What if my unexplained walk had already been reported to him? What if my warning now sounded like the guilty trying to deflect? The trust between us was so new, so fragile. Could it withstand this? I found him still at the high table. The feast was winding down. His eyes found mine as I approached, and a faint smile touched his lips. It died when he saw my face. Ilara, what is it? I opened my mouth. The words Mordred threatened me. He's going to frame me, stuck in my throat. The fear of not being believed was a gag more powerful than any hand. I need to speak with you, privately. It's urgent. His expression tightened. He rose without a word, dismissing the beta who was speaking to him with a glance. He led me not to his war room, but to his private study, a smaller, warmer room lined with books and maps, with a fire crackling in the hearth. He closed the door and turned to me. Tell me. I told him everything, the conversation I'd witnessed, the bribe, Mordred grabbing me, the threat about the midnight walk, the planned theft, the frame-up. The words tumbled out in a frantic, jumbled rush. When I finished, I was shaking. I searched his face, desperate for belief, for the immediate outrage and protection I craved. Kale was silent. He walked to the fireplace, staring into the flames. His profile was stern, unreadable. You saw him give a pouch to Alaric of the Stonewater Pack, he stated, confirming the identity of the nervous man. You know him, a minor alpha, easily swayed, desperate for resources. Kale's voice was flat, and you walked the lower corridors 2 nights ago, alone." My heart sank like a stone. He knew, he'd known about my walk, and he hadn't mentioned it. It was just, I couldn't sleep. I meant no harm. I know. He finally turned to look at me, but his eyes held a turmoil I hadn't seen before. Not anger at Mordred, but a painful, internal conflict. "Elara, your heart is true, I believe that, but Mordred is a master of perception. He has already laid the groundwork. If I act on your word alone, the word of a wolf from a pack with potential motive, seen in suspicious circumstances, it will look like favoritism, like the blindness he accuses me of." The logic was cold, political, and utterly devastating. He believed me, but he couldn't act on it. "Not without proof, so we do nothing." My voice was small. "We wait," he said, the words clearly costing him. "We let him make his move, and we catch him in the act. It is the only way to expose him without destroying the last shreds of unity here." The king was speaking. The man who had held my hand was retreating behind the walls of strategy and necessity. "And if he succeeds, if the jewelry is found in my room, what then, Kale?" I asked, a terrible chill settling in my bones. "Will you hand me over to Boreas to keep the peace?" He crossed the room in 2 strides, his hands coming up to cradle my face. His touch was fierce, his eyes blazing. "Never. I would burn this gathering to the ground before I let him touch you." The vehemence in his voice was shocking, real, but we must be smarter than him, we must be ready. He was asking me to walk into the trap, to live under the threat, to be bait. I looked into his amber eyes, seeing the fear for me warring with his duty to the peace of a dozen packs. The trust wasn't broken, but it was being tested in fire. I took a deep, shuddering breath. The girl from the forest had chosen to save a life. The woman in the mountain had to choose to save a peace and perhaps a king. "All right," I whispered, leaning into his touch for a fleeting moment of stolen strength. "We wait, we watch." He pulled me into a brief, crushing embrace, not a kiss, not a romance, but a pact between soldiers. "I will have Lorcan and Ethan watch your room. They will see everything. And I," he vowed, his voice a low rumble against my ear, "will be watching Mordred." We parted. The plan was set, but as I returned to my chambers, the sense of dread was heavier than ever. The game had escalated. Mordred wasn't just playing for power anymore. He was playing for blood, and my room, my innocence, was now the chessboard. Chapter 10: The Sting of Betrayal. The next 2 days were an exquisite torture. Every moment was stretched thin, every sound a potential alarm. I jumped at shadows, my nerves frayed to breaking. Briar noticed my tension, her kind eyes filled with unasked questions, but I could tell her nothing. Kale was a fortress of calm control in public, but in our brief, stolen moments, I saw the storm in his eyes. Lorcan and Ethan were ghosts, present but unseen, a whispered promise of protection that felt paper-thin against Mordred's cunning. The gift from Boreas arrived on the morning of the 2nd day. A ceremonial brooch, a massive piece of polished amber set in twisted silver, representing the Frostfang pack. It was a traditional token of temporary alliance given to the host Alpha. Kale accepted it publicly in the Great Hall, praising Boreas's generosity. The brooch was then, according to custom, placed in the Hall of Tokens, a secure, locked chamber where such symbolic items were kept during a gathering. That was the bait, and my room was the trap. The plan was simple, according to Kale. Mordred's pawn, Alaric, would somehow steal the brooch and plant it among my things. Then an anonymous tip would lead a furious Boreas to my door. We would catch Alaric in the act, expose Mordred's scheme, and end his machinations in one stroke. But plans, I was learning, were fragile things in the shadow of the mountain. That night I lay in my bed, fully dressed, staring at the moonlit ceiling. Sleep was impossible. Every creak of the ancient keep was a footstep. Every gust of wind was a whispered conspiracy. Then I heard it, not from my door, from the wall, a faint, scraping sound like stone on stone coming from the back of my chamber near the large tapestry depicting the founding of Blackwater. I sat bolt upright, my breath caught in my throat. I'd never paid the tapestry any mind. The scraping came again. A hidden door, panic, cold and sharp, lanced through me. Lorcan and Ethan were watching the corridor. They wouldn't see an entrance I didn't know existed. I slipped silently from the bed, pressing myself against the wall beside the fireplace, my hand closing around a heavy iron poker. The tapestry rustled. A sliver of torchlight from a hidden passage beyond cut through the darkness of my room. A figure, hooded and slight, slipped through the gap. Alaric, he moved with nervous, darting steps, a small leather pouch in his hand. He went straight to my travel bag sitting by the dresser. His hands fumbled as he opened it. Now, I thought, Lorcan should be coming through the main door now. This is it. But the main door remained shut. Silence. Alaric pulled the glittering amber brooch from his pouch and shoved it deep into my bag. He let out a shaky breath, his task complete. And then, instead of fleeing back through the tapestry, he turned. His hood fell back. His terrified eyes met mine across the room. He'd seen me. For a frozen second, we stared at each other. His face was a mask of pure, guilty horror. Then his expression changed. The fear melted into something else, a twisted, desperate resolve. He didn't run. He opened his mouth and screamed, "Thief, help, she has it! She attacked me!" His cries were shrill, piercing, designed to carry. He grabbed a small vase from my dresser and hurled it to the floor, where it shattered. He tore at his own tunic, ripping the fabric. He was manufacturing a scene. Horror immobilized me. This wasn't the plan. He wasn't supposed to get caught by me. He was supposed to be caught by Lorcan in the act of planting. Now it was his word against mine, and he was playing the victim. The door to my chamber burst open, but it wasn't Lorcan or Ethan. It was Boreas, flanked by two of his hulking Frostfang warriors, their faces thunderous. They must have been waiting nearby, tipped off for this exact moment. And right behind them, a look of smooth, feigned shock on his face, was Mordred. "What is the meaning of this?" Mordred demanded, his voice ringing with false authority. We heard cries. Alaric stumbled toward them, pointing a trembling finger at me. She lured me here. Said she had information, then she tried to take the brooch. When I resisted, she attacked. Boreas's eyes swept the room, the shattered vase, Alaric's torn clothes, my bag lying open by the dresser. His gaze landed on me, still clutching the fireplace poker, looking every bit the cornered criminal. Rage suffused his features. You viper," he roared, taking a step forward. "After my token of peace." "It's a lie." I finally found my voice, but it sounded thin, desperate. "He planted it. He came through a hidden passage." I pointed to the tapestry, which now hung still, betraying nothing. Mordred strode forward, peering at the wall. "A hidden passage? In the guest wing? How convenient a story." He looked at Boreas. "My friend, I fear we have been grievously deceived. Not just by a thief, but by a manipulator who spins tales to hide her guilt." "Where is Kale?" Boreas snarled. "He will answer for harboring this snake." As if summoned by the chaos, Kale arrived in the doorway, Lorcan and Ethan at his heels. His face was pale, his eyes taking in the scene with terrifying speed. I saw the instant his plan shattered in his mind. He saw Alaric, the planted evidence, Mordred's poised triumph. He saw me, accused and defenseless. "Explain this," Cale commanded, his voice like frozen steel. Mordred spoke before anyone else could. "It seems your faith was misplaced, Cale. Your guest was caught red-handed, assaulting Alpha Alaric to steal the Frostfang brooch. A direct insult to our gathering, to Boreas, and to your own hospitality." Cale's eyes met mine. In them I didn't see doubt. I saw a furious, helpless understanding. He knew it was a frame, but the trap had been sprung perfectly. The evidence was here. The accuser was playing victim. The political cost of defending me now would be catastrophic. "Search the bag," Cale said, his voice hollow. One of Boreas's warriors strode forward, upended my bag. My few belongings tumbled out. And there, glittering cruelly among my simple clothes, was the massive amber brooch. A collective gasp went up from the growing crowd of onlookers gathered in the corridor. Boreas let out a roar of pure fury. "I demand justice. Under the laws of the gathering, theft by deception is punished by exile or blood." Mordred placed a calming hand on Boreas's arm, the picture of reason. "Justice must be served, of course, but let us not be hasty. Perhaps the king wishes to mitigate the damage, to show his judgment is not entirely clouded." He was offering Cale a way out, a brutal, horrible way out. Disavow me, punish me, save the gathering. All eyes were on Cale. The weight of his kingdom, the fragile peace, the loyalty of the other alphas, it all rested on his next words. He looked from Mordred's smug face to Boreas's rage to Alaric's terrified guilt and finally to me. I saw the agony in his eyes. The man wanted to tear the room apart. The king knew he could not. I couldn't let him choose. I couldn't be the weapon that broke him. I stepped forward, letting the poker clatter to the floor. My voice, when it came, was clear and carried a strange, resigned calm. "There is no need for the king to decide." I looked directly at Boreas. "The brooch was found in my possession. The evidence is plain." I then turned my gaze to Mordred, letting all my contempt show. "And the truth is plain to those who care to see it. This is a farce, orchestrated by a coward who fights with lies instead of strength." Mordred's smirk faltered for a second. I faced Cale. I poured every ounce of my feeling for him, the trust, the budding, unspoken love, the understanding into my eyes. "My king," I said, formal and final, "I submit myself to the justice of the council. I will stand by their verdict." It was surrender. But it was a surrender that protected him. It took the impossible choice from his hands and placed the burden back on the corrupt council. It was the only move I had left. Cale's jaw clenched so tightly I thought the bone would crack. He understood what I was doing. The gratitude and fury in his gaze was a physical force. "Very well," he said, the words ripped from him. "The accused will be confined to her chambers under guard until the council convenes at dawn. The brooch will be secured. All others leave now." The crowd dispersed, buzzing with the scandal. Boreas, mollified for the moment, retrieved his brooch with a snarl. Mordred gave me one last, lingering look of cold victory before following. Soon, only Cale, Lorcan, Ethan, and I remained in the ruined room. The hidden passage was now irrelevant. The trap had worked. Cale crossed the space to me. He didn't touch me. He just stood there, his pain a palpable thing in the space between us. "I failed you," he whispered, the words raw. "No," I said, my own tears finally spilling over. "You warned me. And I walked into it anyway. Now we play his game to the end." The council will vote for exile at best, Ethan said grimly, his face stricken. At worst, they'll give you to Boreas for punishment. Then we find the proof before dawn, Lorcan growled, his first full sentence to me. His eyes were on the tapestry. The passage, it must lead somewhere. Alaric is the key, he will crack. Cale nodded, the king reasserting himself over the heartbroken man. Ethan, you guard her door. Let no one in but me or Lorcan. Lorcan, with me, we hunt. He gave me one last, long look, a promise, an apology, a vow, and then he was gone, vanishing into the night with his shadow to chase the truth. I was left alone in the ruins of my room, the taste of betrayal bitter on my tongue. The walls of Blackwater, which had begun to feel like a sanctuary, were now my prison, and the coming dawn promised not a new day, but a judgment that could end everything. The trust hadn't broken, it had been buried under a mountain of lies, and I had just hours to help dig it out. Chapter 11, The Hunt in the Dark. The door closed with a final, heavy thud. Ethan's broad back was a silent silhouette against the wood. I was alone yet caged. The shattered vase on the floor glittered in the moonlight like scattered tears. The tapestry hung innocently, a silent witness to the secret passage that had been my undoing. Hours stretched, thin and taut. Every minute was a grain of sand slipping through an hourglass poised over my fate. Exile or worse. The images were relentless, being cast out into the frozen wilderness beyond any pack's borders, a lone wolf with a thief's brand, or being handed to Boreas, whose idea of justice would be brutal and swift. I couldn't just wait. Cale and Lorcan were hunting, but the night was deep, and Alaric was surely hidden away by Mordred by now. There had to be something here. I approached the tapestry. It was heavy, woven with scenes of wolves and mountains. I ran my hands along the stone wall behind it, pressing, searching for a seam, a lever, anything. My fingers, still sore from the forest rocks, brushed over a slight indentation, a stone that was ever so slightly more worn than its neighbors. I pushed. Nothing. I pressed upward. With a soft, grinding click, the stone sank in. A section of the wall, perfectly camouflaged, swung inward an inch. My heart leapt into my throat. The passage. I glanced at the door. Ethan was guarding the front, not knowing about this. Should I wait? But waiting was a death sentence. Cale had said to trust him, but he was chasing a ghost. The evidence might be in the passage itself. Gathering my courage, I slipped through the narrow opening into absolute darkness. The air was cold and smelled of damp stone and old dust. I had no torch, no light. I felt my way forward, one hand on the rough, chilly wall. The passage descended, a steep, tight spiral of stairs carved into the mountain's gut. Down and down I went, the silence so profound I could hear the frantic drum of my own heart. I counted steps to keep panic at bay. 50, 100. The air grew colder. At the bottom, the passage leveled out into a narrow corridor. A faint gray light seeped from somewhere ahead, not sunlight, moonlight, filtering through a grate or a crack. I crept toward it. The light came from a small, hidden chamber, little more than a storage alcove forgotten by time, and in the weak moonlight I saw them. Not one, but several items. A silver goblet etched with sunstone markings, a jeweled dagger bearing the crest of a coastal pack, a bolt of fine, eastern silk, and a small, locked chest. This wasn't just about framing me, this was a treasure trove. Alaric, or someone using this passage, had been stealing from the gathering guests, hoarding the loot here. The Frostfang brooch was just the latest, most politically potent piece. My discovery changed everything. This wasn't a simple frame-up, it was a pattern. A scheme to destabilize the entire gathering by sowing paranoia and mistrust. Proof. I had proof of a larger conspiracy. I needed to get something back to show Kale. The chest was locked. The goblet was too large. The dagger, I reached for it. A floorboard behind me creaked. I whirled around. A figure filled the doorway of the alcove, blocking the faint light. Not Alaric, not Kale. Mordred. He stood perfectly still, his face a mask of cold surprise that quickly melted into a chilling smile. Well, well, the curious mouse finds the cheese. And what a feast it is! Terror, sharp and absolute, paralyzed me. He was here, in the secret heart of his own scheme. You, I breathed, you've been stealing from them, turning them against each other. A crude way to put a sophisticated strategy, he murmured, stepping into the alcove. The space shrank around his presence. Fear is a stronger glue than loyalty. Once they all suspect each other, they will look for the one wolf strong enough to provide order. To save them from the chaos, his dark eyes gleamed. Me, and I was in the way, I said, backing up until my shoulders hit the cold stone wall, a symbol of Kale's different way. You were a spark of hope, he corrected, his voice soft, deadly. Hope is the enemy of fear. It had to be extinguished, and what better way than to make you the source of the fear, the thief among them? He took another step. I had nowhere to go. The dagger was in my hand, but it felt like a toy against his predatory grace. Kale is coming, I bluffed, my voice shaking. Is he? Mordred's smile widened. I saw him and his shadow heading toward the Ravenwing quarters, chasing a phantom. I made sure Alaric left a tempting trail. They'll be occupied for a while. He tilted his head, long enough. He moved with sudden, terrifying speed, not to strike me, but to snatch the jeweled dagger from my limp hand. He examined it. A pretty thing. It will look like you stole this too, and when you were discovered down here, you fought with the Alpha who caught you. A tragic, violent end to a sordid little tale. The plan was horrifyingly clear. He would kill me here, plant the stolen goods on my body, and emerge as the hero who caught the treacherous thief in her lair, slain in the struggle. My death would cement my guilt and end any further questions. It was clean, brutal, perfect. Kale will never believe it, I whispered, the last defiance of a cornered animal. He won't have a choice, Mordred said, his voice dropping to an intimate, venomous whisper. The evidence will be overwhelming, and his grief will make him weak, pliable. The great shadow wolf brought low by a pretty nobody. He raised the dagger, the jeweled hilt catching the meager light. Goodbye, Elara, you played your part better than I ever hoped. He lunged. Instinct took over. I didn't try to fight the blade. I dropped straight down, sliding to the floor as the dagger whistled over my head and scraped against stone. I scrambled on my hands and knees between his legs, out of the alcove and into the dark corridor. Run! A voice roared, echoing down the passage. It was Kale. I didn't think. I ran blind back the way I'd come, toward the spiral stairs. Behind me, I heard a snarl of fury, the clash of bodies. Kale had engaged Mordred. Lorcan, the alcove, evidence. Kale's shout bounced off the stone. My lungs burned as I fled up the endless, twisting stairs. The sounds of combat faded below. I burst through the tapestry into my chamber, gasping just as the main door flew open. Ethan stood there, sword drawn, his eyes wide. What in the passage? Kale and Mordred are fighting. Down below, Lorcan is there. I gasped, pointing. Ethan didn't hesitate. He shouted for guards, then plunged into the dark opening I'd left ajar. I stood alone again, shaking violently, my mind reeling. I had the truth, but I had almost died for it. And Kale was down there fighting the most cunning and desperate wolf in the mountains in the dark. Minutes crawled by, each one an eternity. Then noise from the passage, grunts, heavy footsteps. Lorcan emerged first, his knuckles bleeding, dragging a semi-conscious, bruised Alaric. The minor Alpha was babbling. He made me do it. He threatened my pack. The pouch was gold for my silence. Then Ethan appeared, supporting a limping Kale. Kale's lip was split, blood trickling down his chin. A vicious gash marred his forearm. But in his good hand he clutched the jeweled dagger, and his eyes, when they found me, blazed with a ferocious, relieved light. Behind them, 2 Blackwater guards hauled out a furious, disarmed Mordred. His cool facade was gone, replaced by a snarl of pure, unvarnished hatred. His gaze locked on me, promising endless vengeance. "It's over, Mordred," Kale said, his voice ragged but powerful. "The alcove is full of your stolen trophies. Alaric has sung his song. Your plot is exposed." Mordred spat on the floor. "This changes nothing. The distrust is sown. The gathering is already rotten." "Perhaps," Kale said, straightening his shoulders, "the king fully restored, bloodied but unbroken. But the poison source has been cut out, and at dawn the council will see not a thief on trial, but a schemer. And they will witness the truth that stood against him." He looked at me then, and in that look was everything: apology, pride, gratitude, and a promise of what was to come. The trust hadn't just been dug out. It had been forged in the dark, in blood and truth, stronger than ever. The night's hunt was over. The real predator had been caught, and as the first pale hints of dawn touched the high windows, I knew the trial at sunrise would not be mine. It would be his. Chapter 12. Judgment at dawn. The great hall at dawn was a cavern of cold, gray light and colder faces. The alphas of the gathering were assembled once more, but the air no longer crackled with speculative tension. It hummed with a stunned, grim certainty. Word had spread like wildfire through the Predark Keep of a hidden passage, a trove of stolen goods, a confrontation in the deep dark. Kale sat at the head of the stone table, the cut on his lip a stark crimson against his pale skin, his injured arm resting in a sling. He did not look weary. He looked like a mountain that had weathered a storm and now stood unshakable against a clearing sky. I sat beside him, no longer in the shadowed chair, but in a seat of honor at the table itself. Ceridwen sat on his other side, her silver head held high, a bastion of silent support. In the center of the room, bound and flanked by 4 stone-faced Blackwater guards, stood Mordred. His fine clothes were torn and dust-stained from the struggle in the passage. His handsome face was a ruin of bruises and smeared dirt, but his dark eyes burned with an undimmed, hateful fire. He looked not at his accusers, but at me. Arrayed on the table before Kale were the damning items: the sunstone goblet, the coastal dagger, the eastern silk, the small chest now pried open to reveal more trinkets, and beside them the frostfang brooch. Alpha Boreas stared at the brooch, then at the other items, his face a battlefield of fury and dawning, shameful understanding. Alpha Cyrus of Sunstone had lost all his charm. He looked pale and shaken, fingering the spot where his own missing goblet had been. "Let the council convene," Kale's voice rang out, silencing the low murmur. "An accusation of treachery has been made, not against our guest, Alara of Silverfang, but against one of our own, Alpha Mordred of Ravenwing." A ripple went through the assembly. Saying it aloud made it real. Kale gestured to Lorcan, who stepped forward, his report concise and brutal. He described the hidden passage, the alcove, the stolen cash. He produced Alaric of Stonewater, who, shaking like a leaf, confessed in a broken voice the threats to his pack, the bribes, the orders to plant the brooch and cry thief. Then Cale spoke. He told of following a false trail, of doubling back on a suspicion, of finding the passage entrance ajar. He did not mention my own exploration. He painted himself as the sole hunter, protecting my involvement, shielding me from any residual doubt. I confronted Mordred in the act of attempting to murder Alara to silence her, he finished, his gaze like iron as it settled on his foe. The evidence and the witness are before you. Mordred finally spoke. His voice was hoarse but clear, stripped of all pretense. You believe the word of a sniveling coward and a backwoods nobody over mine. This is a farce, a pathetic attempt by a weakening king to remove a rival. The evidence is not words, Boreas growled, his voice thick with humiliation. He pointed a thick finger at his brooch. That is my people's honor. You used it as a tool. You made me your fool. The betrayal in his eyes was turning from me to Mordred, a far more dangerous shift. And my goblet, Cyrus said quietly, all slyness gone, a family heirloom. You sought to make thieves of us all, Mordred, to make us fear each other while you picked our pockets and plotted our downfall. The tide was turning irrevocably. Cale rose. The laws of the gathering are clear. Theft, deception, and attempted murder of a guest under the covenant of peace. The plotting of discord among allied packs. What is your judgment? One by one, the alphas spoke. Their voices were hard, their verdict unanimous. Exile, Boreas spat. Let the winter wastes have him. Brand him a packless one, said another. Let no territory grant him shelter. Strip him of his title, Cyrus added, his eyes cold. Ravenwing must choose a new alpha, one not steeped in poison. Mordred listened, his head held high, his expression one of contempt for them all. When the last judgment fell, he laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. Exile, so be it. You cast out the only one among you with the vision to rule more than a patch of rock and snow. You cling to your fragile peace, led by a king who prizes a peasant's heart over a warrior's ambition. His eyes found mine, and the hatred in them was a physical force. This is not over. A shadow does not die with the setting sun. It merely waits for the light to fade. The guards moved to take him away. As they passed my chair, he wrenched himself to a stop, leaning close. His whisper was for me alone, a final, venomous dart. You think you've won, you've only made the enemy more desperate. He will come for you, and when he does, your kind heart will be the death of everything you love. Then he was dragged, struggling, from the hall. His final prophecy hung in the air, a chilling mist. The council was dismissed. The alphas left, their faces grave, the foundations of their world shaken. The stolen goods were returned to their owners with solemn apologies from Cale. The gathering was saved, but it was wounded, its innocence gone. Finally, only Cale, Ceridwen, and I remained in the vast, empty hall. The dawn sun now streamed through the high windows, painting bars of gold on the stone floor. Ceridwen placed a gentle hand on her son's shoulder, then on mine. You have done a brave thing, child. You faced the darkness and did not blink. She smiled, a tired, proud smile, and left us alone. The silence stretched, filled with the echoes of the confrontation, the ghost of Mordred's threat. Cale turned to me. He didn't speak. He simply looked at me, and in his amber eyes I saw the full weight of the night, the fear when he'd heard my scream in the passage, the fury of the fight, the relief of finding me alive, and now a profound, aching vulnerability. He was going to kill you, Cale said, his voice rough, because of me, because I brought you into this. He was going to kill the truth, I corrected softly, and you stopped him. He reached out, his good hand cupping my cheek, his thumb gently brushing away a smudge of dirt from the passage. The touch sent a tremor through me. When I heard his voice in that darkness, when I knew you were there with him, I have never known such fear. He swallowed hard. It had nothing to do with alliances or peace. It was personal. The admission hung between us, vast and undeniable. He said this wasn't over, I whispered, leaning into his touch. He said he would come for me. Cale's expression hardened, the vulnerability replaced by fierce protectiveness. Mordred is gone, his schemes are exposed, he has no power here. But the chill of the final threat lingered. Mordred hadn't said I, he said he, as if someone else was waiting in the wings, a deeper shadow. Before I could voice the fear, Cale spoke again, his voice dropping, intense. Alara, the gathering will end in 3 days, the packs will disperse. He paused, searching my face. My question from the forest stands, but now it comes from a king who has seen your courage, and from a man who cannot imagine this mountain without your light. Will you stay, not as a guest, not as a political statement, but as mine, as my partner? To help me build the peace we almost lost. My breath caught. It was everything I hadn't dared hope for, laid bare in the morning light. A place, a purpose, a heart that called to mine, but Mordred's whisper echoed. Your kind heart will be the death of everything you love. Could I stay? Could I bind my fate to this mountain, to this king, knowing the enemies I had made, the shadows that still lurked? I looked into Cale's eyes, saw the hope warring with the fear of my refusal. I thought of Hilda's smile, of the choice in the forest, of the girl who had finally found her voice. The shadow was a threat, but his hand on my cheek was a promise. I placed my hand over his, holding it to my face. Yes, I said, the word a vow, a beginning, a defiance of all the darkness. I will stay. For a moment he just looked at me as if memorizing my face in the dawn light. Then he pulled me gently into the circle of his good arm, not a kiss, not a grand gesture, but a quiet, solemn embrace, a claiming, a shelter, a homecoming. Outside the hall, the keep was waking to a new day. The crisis was past, the truth had won. But as I stood in the strength of Cale's arms, the sun warming the stone around us, I couldn't shake the feeling that the most dangerous game was not behind us. It was just beginning, and the next move belonged to the shadow Mordred had promised was still coming. Chapter 13, The Shadows Ere the 3 days following Mordred's exile passed in a strange, suspended calm. The gathering concluded not with celebration, but with solemn, business-like agreements. The bonds were mended, but the trust was now a practical thing, tempered by the knowledge of how easily it could be broken. Packs began their journeys home, their banners departing Blackwater Keep like colorful leaves falling from a wounded tree. Cale was everywhere, overseeing departures, giving final assurances, his presence a steadying rock in the receding tide of chaos. But whenever our eyes met, a private, warm current passed between us. The unspoken understanding of my yes hummed in the air, a promise waiting to be fulfilled. Saradwin took charge of my transition. My belongings were moved from the guest wing to a suite of rooms adjacent to the family quarters, airy, elegant chambers with a stunning view of the river valley. They were not Cale's rooms, but their proximity was a declaration in itself. We will have a formal ceremony, Saradwin told me as we arranged books on a shelf. Not a mating ceremony of old, but a binding of partnership. The pack must see, must understand. It will take time to prepare. Time, it was a luxury I hadn't considered. In the whirlwind of danger and decisions, I hadn't paused to think about the reality of what staying meant. The politics, the scrutiny, the endless responsibility. My first lesson came swiftly. It was during a final, private dinner with the departing Alpha Boreas. The giant Frostfang wolf had been gruffly apologetic, his shame over being Mordred's pawn translating into a fierce, newfound loyalty to Kale. As the meal ended, he turned to me. "You have spine, girl," he grunted. "Silverfang should be proud, but a word of advice from an old wolf. The mountain is high, but the winds are cold at the peak. You have won the king's heart, now you must win his people. And not all will welcome a new star in their sky." His words were well meant, but they echoed Mordred's lingering threat in a different key. "You have made enemies." The next enemy revealed herself not with a dagger, but with a smile. Her name was Lysandra. She was a Blackwater wolf, daughter of a high-ranking elder, a she-wolf of stunning beauty and refined grace. She had been away visiting distant relatives during the gathering and returned to a keep buzzing with talk of the mysterious Silverfang female who had exposed a traitor and captured the king's favor. She requested an audience with me under the guise of welcoming me to the pack. We met in the sunlit gardens. Lysandra was exquisite, her dark hair coiled intricately, her gown of sheer silver a masterpiece. Her smile was perfect. Her words were flawless. "My dear Alara, such tales we have heard, you must be exhausted from your ordeal. To come from such a simple life and be thrust into all this." She gestured gracefully to the towering keep. "It must be overwhelming." Every compliment was a velvet-trapped barb. Simple life, overwhelming. "I am adapting," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "The people of Blackwater have been kind." "Of course they have," she purred, sipping her herbal tea. "We are a loyal pack, devoted to our king. We so desperately want what is best for him." She set her cup down with a delicate click. "Some of us have spent our entire lives preparing to stand at his side, to understand the burdens of the crown. It is a weight not meant for unprepared shoulders." The message was clear. I was an interloper, a temporary distraction. She was the rightful candidate. "Kale's choice is his own," I replied, meeting her cool blue eyes, "and I trust his judgment." Her perfect smile tightened. "As do we all. We shall see how well his judgment serves the pack in the long winter to come. Tradition is a comfort, you know. When the snows fall, we cling to what we know." She left soon after, leaving the scent of expensive perfume and simmering rivalry in her wake. This was the enemy Boreas had warned me of, not a scheming alpha, but a pack member who saw me as a threat to her own ambition and to the established order. The challenge was subtle, social, and in some ways more daunting than Mordred's blatant malice. Later that day, I sought out Kale in his study. He was reviewing scrolls, but looked up immediately, his stern expression softening at the sight of me. "Lysandra," I said without preamble, "she sees me as a threat." Kale sighed, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "Lysandra sees the world as a hierarchy she was born to climb. Pay her no mind, her influence is less than she believes." "It's not just her," I insisted, sitting across from him. "It's the idea of me, an outsider, a nobody. They accepted me as a curious guest, even as a victim to be protected. But as your partner," the word still felt new, thrilling, and terrifying on my tongue. "That is different. Some will resist." He stood and came around the desk, leaning against it before me. "They resisted me when I first took the crown. Too young, they said, too untested. Leadership is not given, Alara, it is earned, and you have already begun. The guards respect you for your courage." The servants adore you for your kindness to Briar. The council elders are wary, but they saw you face down Mordred. That commands a different respect. He took my hands. We will earn it together, day by day, but you must be prepared. Not everyone will have a hidden passage and a cache of stolen jewels. Some battles will be fought with whispers and turned backs. I nodded, squeezing his hands. I understand. Just then, a frantic knock sounded at the door. Ethan entered without waiting, his face uncharacteristically grim. Cale, a writer from the Northern Border Watch. He's in the hall, it's urgent. The warmth of the moment shattered. We followed Ethan out. In the entrance hall, a young Blackwater scout, caked in mud and panting, stood before Lorcan. He held out a rolled missive sealed with wax the color of dried blood, a color used for the most grave, immediate threats. "My king," the scout gasped, from the watchtower at the Bleak Pass. Cale took the scroll, broke the seal, and read. His face, already serious, turned to granite. A muscle ticked in his jaw. "What is it?" I asked, dread pooling in my stomach. He didn't answer immediately. He handed the scroll to Lorcan, whose eyes scanned it and narrowed to slits. "Mordred," Cale said, the name dropping like a stone. "He did not head into exile in the western wastes as decreed." "Where did he go?" Ethan demanded. Cale's amber eyes, when they lifted to meet mine, were filled with a storm of fury and foreboding. "East," he said, the word heavy with implication. "Towards the scarred plains, towards the territory of the Blood Moon Pack." A collective, sharp intake of breath came from those assembled. Even I, with my limited knowledge, felt a chill. The Blood Moon Pack, they were not part of the gathering. They were reclusive, savage, and rumored to practice old, dark magics. They were boogeymen in stories told to frighten pups. "The Blood Moon Alpha Varg," Lorcan growled. "He has no love for our alliances. He craves territory, power. And Mordred," Cale finished, his voice low and deadly, "has just arrived at his doorstep with a grudge, and with intimate knowledge of our defenses, our alliances, our weaknesses." Mordred's final threat in the hall echoed in my mind, now horribly clear. "He will come for you." He hadn't meant himself. He had been speaking of the monster he was now running to. He was trading secrets for sanctuary and vengeance. The external threat had not been eliminated. It had transformed into something far more terrifying. Mordred was no longer a lone schemer. He was a traitor uniting with the most feared and hostile power in the territories. The peace we had fought so hard to preserve was already over. A new, darker war was gathering on the horizon, and its architect was a shadow we had cast out, now returning with an army of nightmares at his back. Cale's hand found mine again, but this grip was different. It was the grip of a commander steeling himself, and of a man vowing to protect what was his. "The winter just got longer," he said, his gaze fixed on some distant, grim future, "and the winds just got colder." The carefree promise of our new beginning was gone, swallowed by the looming shadow of the blood moon. Our partnership would not be forged in peaceful courtship, but in the fires of a coming storm. Chapter 14, The Forging Winter descended on Blackwater Keep like a siege. It wasn't the gentle snows of my Silverfang forest. This was a mountain winter, a roaring white beast that howled against the stone walls and buried the world in a deep, silent grave. The passes sealed. The world shrank to the keep and the few hardy souls who dared the frozen courtyards, but the real cold was inside. The news of Mordred's defection to the Blood Moon Pack had spread, a poison in the water. The fragile unity of the gathering froze and cracked under this new, existential threat. Whispers turned from gossip to grim strategy, from social snubs to survival calculations. My place was no longer a question of acceptance, but of necessity. Kale had no time for a gentle courtship. The pack needed to see a united front now more than ever. Our binding, as Saradwin called it, was expedited. It was not the grand ceremony she had envisioned. It was a solemn, austere rite performed in the heart of the keep before the assembled elders and captains, with the wind screaming a dirge outside. I wore a simple gown of blackwater gray and silver. Kale wore his ceremonial armor. There were no flowers, no feasts. We spoke vows not of love and passion, but of loyalty, partnership, and shared responsibility before the ancestors and the pack. Our hands were bound with a strip of leather from a wolf that had died defending the keep generations ago. Where one stands, both stand. Where one is weak, the other is strong. This bond is of will, of purpose, of pack. The elder's voice echoed in the cold chamber. Kale's eyes held mine as the leather was tied. In them I saw not a lover's promise, but a commander's trust and a man's profound, grateful resolve. When the rite was done, he didn't kiss me. He pressed his forehead to mine, a gesture of wolves, of family, of an unbreakable bond forged in crisis. "My partner," he murmured, the word thick with meaning, and just like that I was no longer a Lyra of Silverfang. I was a Lyra of Blackwater, partner to the king. There was no time to adjust. The war council began that same evening. I was expected to attend. Not as a silent observer, but as a contributor. The long table in the strategy room was covered in maps weighted down by daggers and cups. Kale sat at the head, Lorcan and Ethan to his right, the grizzled war captains to his left. A seat was left empty for me beside Kale. The atmosphere was thick with tension and pipe smoke. All eyes tracked me as I entered and took my seat. I saw skepticism in some, curiosity in others, blank masks in most. "Report from the Eastern Scouts," a captain with a scar across his brow began. "The Blood Moon are gathering, not just warriors, they're mobilizing. Smithies work day and night, they're building siege engines." "Varg would not move for Mordred's pretty words alone," Lorcan stated. "Mordred must have offered something concrete, our patrol schedules, guard rotations, the weak points in our mountain defenses." A heavy silence fell. The betrayal was a wound that kept bleeding. "We must fortify the bleak pass," Ethan said, pointing to a narrow defile on the map. "It's the only approach for an army before the deep snows fully close the high paths. It's also a killing ground," argued another captain. "If we commit our forces there and they find another way, we're trapped." "We need more information," Kale said, his voice weary. "We are making guesses in the dark." All heads turned as a new voice, quiet but clear, spoke into the space. "The scarred plains." It was me. Every eye at the table locked onto me. I felt my cheeks heat, but I kept my gaze on the map. "You said they are mobilizing on the scarred plains." I pointed to the vast, empty area east of the Blood Moon territory. "It's flat, exposed. Why gather there where you can be seen instead of in the shelter of your own forests, unless you're not just gathering? You're waiting for something or someone to join you." Kale leaned forward, his interest sharp. "Another ally. Mordred wouldn't stop with one," I continued, a thread of intuition weaving through my fear. "He plays the long game," he told me himself. "He sows fear to make himself the solution." If he went to Blood Moon, he didn't just offer our secrets. He offered them a coalition, a chance to be the dominant power in a broken territory. Who else fears your strength, Kale? Who else was unhappy at the gathering? The captains exchanged glances. One muttered, Frostfang was angry, but Boreas is loyal now. Sunstone is too cunning to side with savages. Not the alphas, I pressed, the pieces clicking into a horrifying picture. The ones who lost, the ones Mordred was stealing from, the minor packs like Stonewater. Alaric was weak, easily manipulated. What if Mordred wasn't just stealing their trinkets? He was compiling a list of the dissatisfied, the vulnerable, the greedy, and now, from the safety of Blood Moon, he's sending them promises. Promises of spoils, of new status if they join him against the tyrant of the mountain. The room was utterly still. My theory hung in the air, awful and plausible. Lorcan let out a low whistle. He's not raising an army, he's raising a rebellion. Cale stared at me, a new, profound respect dawning in his eyes, mixed with grim acknowledgement. You see the board differently, he said. Not as a soldier, but as someone who understands the heart of a grievance, the lure of a promise. It was my first true contribution as his partner, not in battle, but in strategy, in understanding the enemy's mind. From that moment, my role was cemented. I became Cale's sounding board, the one who asked why when everyone else asked how. I reviewed provisions not just for warriors, but for the families who would shelter within the keep. I spoke with the healers, ensuring stores of medicine and poultices. I moved among the people, my presence a quiet statement that their king's partner cared for their fear, for the children who had bad dreams about the Blood Moon. I also faced Lysandra and her ilk. Their subtle barbs continued, but they had less bite now. I was no longer an outsider hoping to belong. I was a pillar of the fortress, and their sniping sounded petty against the backdrop of real danger. One day, I found her directing servants to move tapestries to warmer halls. I simply said, "The tapestries stay. The children play in this corridor, and the stone is cold. Their comfort is more important than decoration." She had stared, speechless, then bowed her head in acquiescence. It was a small victory, but it tasted of true authority. Yet at night, in the quiet of my new chambers, still separate from Cale's by unspoken mutual agreement to let this new bond settle, the fear returned. Not for myself, but for him. I saw the endless weight on his shoulders, the maps he studied until his eyes were red, the way he rubbed the old scar on his jaw when he was deep in thought. One such night, he came to my door. He didn't enter, just stood in the threshold, the torchlight from the hall casting his shadow long behind him. He looked exhausted to his soul. "Can't sleep?" I asked softly. He shook his head. The same calculations over and over, numbers of men, lengths of sieges, supplies. He looked at me, his guard down, revealing the man beneath the crown. "I keep thinking of what you said, about promises. What promise can I make to my people that is stronger than the ones Mordred is weaving from hate and greed?" I stepped forward, taking his hand. It was cold. "You don't need to promise them the moon," I said. "Just the truth, that you will stand with them, that this mountain is their home and you will defend it with your last breath. That's a promise a king can keep." "It's the promise you made to me." He turned my hand over in his, tracing the lines of my palm with his thumb. "You have become my compass, Alara. In all this chaos, you are my true north." He lifted my hand and pressed his lips to my knuckles, a gesture of startling tenderness that sent a shock of warmth through the cold dread in my chest. It wasn't a kiss of passion, but one of profound, aching gratitude and connection. "I must go back," he sighed, releasing my hand reluctantly. "The watch changes at midnight." "Cale," I called as he turned. He looked back. We will face this, not just you and your army, you and me and this pack together." He gave a single, solemn nod, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. Together, he left, and I closed the door, leaning against it. The winter outside was fierce, the enemy was gathering. But inside these stone walls, something was being forged stronger than any sword or siege engine. A partnership, a trust, a love that was not about flowers and poetry, but about shared purpose and unwavering faith. We were being tempered in the cold, hard fire of coming war. And I knew with a certainty that steadied my soul that when the storm finally broke, we would face it not as king and consort, but as two halves of a single, unbreakable shield for the people we were learning to love. The forging was almost complete. The testing was yet to come. Chapter 15, The Unbreakable Shield. The first attack did not come at the bleak pass. It came in silence in the dead of a moonless night, 2 weeks after the deepest snows had fallen. They came through the mountains. Not an army, but a dagger, a hand-picked squad of blood moon warriors, guided by someone who knew the old, forgotten paths. Mordred's knowledge. Their target was not the gates or the walls, it was the granaries and the healers' stores. They sought not to conquer, but to cripple, to spread panic, to starve us out before a single sword was crossed in the open. The alarm was raised not by a guard, but by a kitchen maid who saw shadows where there should be none. Her scream was a match tossed into tinder. The keep erupted into controlled chaos. Bells clanged, boots pounded on stone. Kale was a storm incarnate, buckling on his armor as he strode towards the courtyard, Lorcan and Ethan at his heels. I was at his side before he could order me to stay behind. "Alara, the inner keep," he began, his face a mask of battle fury. "The inner keep is where they will strike next if they break through," I said, my voice cutting through the din. I had spent weeks memorizing the keep's layout, its vulnerabilities. The granary is a feint. The real target is morale. They want terror. I can help coordinate the defenses from the Great Hall. I know where the non-combatants are sheltering. I know which corridors need guarding. He saw the resolve in my eyes, the same resolve that had faced down a council of alphas. He saw not a liability, but a lieutenant. He gave a sharp, single nod. "Ethan, with her, protect her. She commands in my stead there." Ethan's usual grin was gone, replaced by deadly seriousness. With my life, Kale's hand found mine for a fleeting, crushing moment. "Stay safe." Then he was gone, swallowed by the stream of warriors flowing toward the lower courtyards. The Great Hall had been transformed into a crisis center. Children huddled with mothers, elders watched with grim eyes, healers prepared stations. Fear was a scent in the air. I climbed onto the dais. All eyes turned to me. I saw Lysandra there, her face pale, her perfect composure shattered. She looked at me not with rivalry, but with desperate hope. "Listen," I called out, my voice echoing in the vast space. "The king and our warriors are engaging the enemy. Our job is to hold the heart of the keep." Guards to the inner corridor junctions, points Alpha, Beta, and Gamma as we drilled. Healers prepare for burns and blade wounds. The enemy uses fire. Everyone else, stay calm, watch your neighbors, help will come where it is needed. My orders, born from endless discussions with Kale and the captains, were clear and precise. The pack, trained for this, responded. The frantic energy coalesced into purposeful motion. I was a steady flame in the center of the storm. Then the sounds of real battle reached us, the clash of steel, guttural shouts, a scream that was abruptly cut off. It was close, too close. A guard stumbled in from the eastern servant's entrance, blood streaming from his temple. They're inside, a dozen, maybe more, in the lower archives. The archives connected to the inner halls through a back staircase, a direct path to us. Panic threatened to rise again. I looked at Ethan. Take 6 guards, seal the archive entrance from this side, hold that staircase. Ethan hesitated, his duty to stay with me warring with the tactical need. Go, I commanded, the authority in my voice surprising even me. I am safe here, that staircase is not. He went, minutes stretched thin as ice. The sounds of fighting in the courtyard seemed to recede. Were we winning, or were they being overrun? The not knowing was its own torture. Then, a new sound, not from outside, from within the hall itself. A slow scraping from behind the massive tapestry at the rear, the same wall where my old guest room had been. A hidden entrance, unknown to us, built in some long-forgotten age. The tapestry rippled. A blade, curved and cruel, slit through the fabric from behind. They were here. Mordred had saved his most devastating piece of knowledge for last. Screams erupted. The guards in the hall rushed toward the tapestry, but they were too few, spread too thin. From the slit, a blood moon warrior emerged, then another, their faces painted with ash and blood, their eyes wild. They were inside our sanctuary. For a heartbeat I froze. This was not a council debate. This was raw, savage violence. The children's cries pierced the fog of my fear. You are a reminder, Kale's voice echoed in my mind. You are a pillar. I was not a warrior. But I was the partner of the king, and this was my pack. I did not have a sword. I grabbed the only thing within reach, a heavy iron candle stand from the altar of the ancestors. I stepped off the dais, placing myself between the advancing warriors and the huddled cluster of mothers and children. Hold the line, I shouted to the remaining guards, my voice ringing with a power I didn't know I possessed. For Blackwater. The lead warrior saw me, a woman with a candlestick, and snarled in contempt. He lunged. I didn't try to match his skill. I used his momentum. As he swung his curved blade, I sidestepped and brought the heavy iron base down on his weapon arm with all my strength. Bone cracked. He howled, his sword clattering to the stone. The second warrior came at me. I was off balance. I saw the killing blow coming. A gray blur shot past me. Selene, my moon-white mare? No, it was Lorcan. He must have fought his way back from the courtyard. He moved like death itself, his swords a silver whirlwind. The second warrior fell. 2 more emerged from the tapestry, and Lorcan met them. But the first warrior, clutching his broken arm, had drawn a dagger with his other hand. His hate-filled eyes were on me. He scrambled toward me, ignoring Lorcan's battle. I raised the candlestick again, but I was tired and he was fueled by pain and hate. Just as he leapt, a roar filled the hall, not a roar of rage, but of pure, protective fury. Kale. He burst through the main doors, covered in grime and blood that was not his own. He saw the warrior in midair, lunging for me. In one fluid, terrifying motion, he threw his own sword. It was not a throw meant to disarm. It was a missile of vengeance. The blade took the Blood Moon warrior in the chest, throwing him back against the wall where he slid to the floor, motionless. Silence, sudden and absolute, fell in the great hall. The tapestry entrance was secured, the last warriors within cut down by Lorcan. The only sounds were the ragged breaths of the defenders and the soft crying of a child. Kale didn't retrieve his sword. He crossed the hall in 3 strides. His hands came up to frame my face, his eyes scanning me for injuries, wild with a fear greater than any he'd shown in battle. "You're hurt," he breathed, seeing a scratch on my arm from a flying splinter of stone. "It's nothing," I whispered, my hands coming up to cover his, my whole body trembling now that the danger had passed. He pulled me to him then, a crushing, desperate embrace there in the center of the hall before his entire pack. It was not a king embracing his partner. It was a man holding the most precious thing in his world, a thing he had almost lost. "You held the heart," he murmured into my hair, his voice thick. "You held it when I could not." Over his shoulder I saw the pack looking at us. I saw Lysandra, her hand over her mouth, tears in her eyes, not of jealousy, but of awe and unity. I saw the guards, their respect now mingled with something like devotion. I saw the children, their fear quieting as they watched their king and his partner, an unbreakable shield in the center of the storm. The attack was over. The Blood Moon raiders inside the keep were dead. The force outside had been repelled, though at great cost. Mordred's first gambit had failed. Later, in the quiet aftermath, as dawn broke over a blood-stained snowfield, Kale and I stood on the battlements. Below, the pyres for our dead burned with solemn honor. In the distance, the retreating shadows of the Blood Moon host slithered back to the scarred plains. "He tested us," Kale said, his arm around my shoulders. "He tested our strength, our will, our unity. And we did not break," I said, leaning into his solid warmth. "No," he agreed, looking down at me. In the pale morning light, his eyes held not just the amber of a king, but the soft gold of a man at peace with his choice. "Because of you, you saw the threat in the council. You understood the enemy's heart. You commanded our people in the darkness." He turned me to face him. "You are not just my partner, Alara, you are my equal in every way." He didn't kiss me. The moment was too profound, too sacred for that. Instead, he leaned his forehead against mine as he had at our binding. A whisper of breath, a shared warmth against the winter chill. "The war is not over," I said quietly. "Mordred is still out there. Varg is still coming." "I know," he said, pulling back to look at the rising sun painting the snow in hues of rose and fire. "But let them come. They think they fight a king on a mountain. They do not understand." He took my hand, lacing his fingers with mine, our joined hands a fist against the cold sky. "They fight a king and his queen. They fight a pack with an unbreakable heart. They fight the very spirit of this mountain now. And that is a battle they cannot win." Together we watched the new day dawn. The shadow of Mordred still loomed, the Blood Moon still threatened, but we stood hand in hand on the ramparts of our home. The girl who had missed a ceremony for a stranger had found her destiny. The king who sought truth had found his strength. Our story had begun with a choice in a dark forest. It would continue not with an ending but with a promise to face every coming storm, every shadow together, as partners, as equals, as the unbreakable shield of Blackwater. And for the first time, looking out at the future sheathed in ice and uncertainty, I felt no fear. Only certainty, only home.